Okay, and we're live. Hey, what's up, guys? James here. Back with some Witcher no Holy Night. Whatever you want to call it. Yes, alright. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to stream today, but looks like things worked out, so we're good to continue. Last time we left off, it was last week. We had to convince Alice to not kill us, which we managed to do by shitty tea in front of her while she was sleeping in front of the front hall? Atrium? What do you call it? I don't know. But anyways, so we've convinced her that to keep us alive. So that's all good and dandy. We are Nakayoshi now. So now we'll probably have to pay rent. But we'll see what happens from here. Because I think it was a pretty good cutting point there, so I don't really know where the story's going to escalate from this point. That says pure category. Oh, hey, Master Mouse. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. I'm going to change that now. I'm an idiot. Oh, right. There we go. I kind of hate that I have to do that every time. So there's this every now and then I would just forget. I'm like, oh, whatever. It is what it is. Whatever. Let's continue. My reaction. There you go. How you doing, man? I'm finally on holiday break, so you might see me play or read a bit more through the week, through the next couple of weeks. We'll see, I don't know. Anyway, Saki High School's winter vacation began in mid-December. The tranquil air of the school was a refreshing change of pace from the more competitive schools and their nationally famous sports teams and exam-oriented curriculum. Made a GoFundMe page for Sojiro so he can live back at his own place without the fear of the witches. Man needs it. He's being extorted. The empty, newly constructed building evoked images of a pure white swan descending upon a still winter lake. The modern school building felt alive in its stillness, in spite of the absence of its lifeblood of students. Most students never knew what this building used to look like. It was just a small, run-down building, the shadow of its former self. Former school was never torn down, and now stood in lonely silence. Oh, there's an old school building. You know, something's gonna happen there. It was tucked away deep in a seemingly infinite wood that stretched across the mountains. The sound of brooms sweeping dead leaves resonated in the air. The ocean of leaves had accumulated into piles as big as sand dunes. Sweeping was a futile venture at this point. An ominous feeling lingered in the air, perhaps the result of 2 years of abandonment. Cleaning the inside of the building alone would take more than a few days to finish. Not to mention...
本当だり、存在価値が見出せねえ。ばっかじゃねえの。冬休みは短いってのになんでこんなことやらせんだよ、生徒会は。
Hey. This guy the youth sent here for the job wasted no time making it clear he wanted no part in the beautification efforts.
っていうか、ジャージでやらせんなよ。ジャンパーぐらい着させろよな。何これ、もしかして体育の報酬？寒中マラソン？俺体育だけはサボったことねえんすけどね。
Yeah, see, this is Sojiro's natural habitat in the wild, so I think he's probably okay doing this. Oscar Kinomi continued to mumble and grumble to himself as he reluctantly swept away the ground. Meanwhile, Sojiro silently and swiftly continued his sweeping, glaring at Kinomi out of the corner of his eye.
おい、何真面目にやってんだよ。こんなの適当でいいんだって。大 だいたい40人しかいねえのにこんな山みたいな庭の掃除なんか終わるかってんだ。
終わらないことなんてない。少しうるさいぞ木の実は。
Kinomi went back to idly swinging his broom, without even glancing over at Sojiro. Things on the mountain were cold. There was no hint of sun in the cloudy sky above. Grey light illuminated the rear courtyard. The sharp cold of winter pierced through everyone's gloves, as if they did not exist. A day like this was best spent indoors under warm blankets. For some reason, you're out cleaning. Special Winter Cleaning Team. That was the name given to this elite force sent to clean up this dilapidated, overgrown mountain. Elite force. The other students had put their faith into this team to fulfill their beautification mission, respecting them for their sacrifice. The reality, however, was that this was nothing more than a ragtag, fear-losing gang of students, needing remedial lessons before their exams. They were the victims of a year-long arm-twisting scheme by the student council. Who in their right mind would come out here to sweep up leaves with a blizzard looming on the horizon? There's a blizzard coming and they're sweeping up the mountain. Other than one of the 40 assembled, none of them had any semblance of interest in the task at hand.
おい見ろよしずき。赤羽たち向こうで焼き芋とかレトロな真似してやがる。2番煎じはいかにも頭悪いしな。そうだ、俺たちはイカでも焼かねえ。
Kinomi did not want to be here to begin with. He was constantly trying to break Sojiro into joining him. The cleaning squad was divided into groups. Sojiro and Kinomi were in charge of cleaning behind the gymnasium. Sojiro was the leader of the platoon. Kinomi was a grunt.
ああ、こことあっちの垣根をきれいにしたら、焼き芋だろうと焼きイカだろうと猫鍋だろうと好きにしよう。その
Yeah. Sojiro said as he expertly packed his swept leaves into trash bags. 2 hours had passed since they assembled on this foggy morning at 7 o'clock. While everyone else chatted and laughed as they worked, Sojiro alone had worked in complete silence at the same blistering pace since he started. The sheer amount of work he put in was likely the only thing keeping him from complaining of the cold in his thin jersey.
なあ、やめようぜ。見ろ、そこの池、スケートリンク。やっぱ池？とにかくそこの池らしきものだってカチカチに凍ってるぐらいなんだぜ。こんな雪原じゃ人体は普通動かねえよ。機械伯爵でもなきゃだよ。そろそろ人間狩りが始まるよ。なんでいい加減休憩しねえ。せっかく枯葉集めたんだから燃やして温まんないとさ。どうせ監視役は殿下しかいないんだしさ。なあ、焼きイカやろうぜ。焼きイカ。
For some reason, Kinomi was droning on about his squid. Sojiro had managed to withstand the barrage of complaints from his comrade. Even he was reaching his limit.
木の実、頼むから。
Just then, Sojiro saw the Grim Reaper himself creeping behind Kinomi. In his hand, he held a rake instead of a soft bamboo broom.
いいぜ。お前がイカなんてもんを用意してるほどの大人物だってんなら、慎んでイカ焼きぐらい許可してやるよ。なんなら醤油はこっちで用意してやろう。
Kinomi shot to attention at the voice behind him.
その物言い、築地何がし。
Before quickly turning around, swinging his broom in the process, Koimaru easily blocked the swing with his rake.
ああ、てめえ、やる気十分じゃねえか。溢れる労働意欲を抑えきれないってわけか。なんならシベリアコースにでも行っちまうか。
女ども集めて焼却炉に陣取ってる野郎の言葉なんざ聞かねえよ。真冬に南国気分とかマジ寒いわ。
Both boys glared at each other with a wry smile, broom and rake locked in an embrace. These two were only friendly with each other on school grounds.
飛び丸、一応彼は戦力なんだから邪魔しないでくれ。
Both of them scoffed angrily and put away their weapons. They both knew better than to argue with Sojiro, the only one cleaning with a garbage bag in hand.
それで何しに来たんだ飛び丸。君はあったかい焼却炉の前で永遠に火の管理をすると豪語していたんじゃなかったっけ？
Pretending. Harsh comment. Apparently even Sojiro had a slight taste for drama.
なんてこった。善良な生徒ですら俺をそんな目で見るのか。
Tobimaru seemed sad at Sojiro's observation. As long as Tobimaru continued to claim he was helping the girls clean by doing nothing more than standing in front of a pile of burning leaves, Sojiro found it hard to sympathize.
いいから要件を言えよ。殿下と違って俺らは暇じゃねえんだ。
ああ、そうかよ。宗次郎、そろそろ小休止だ。向こうで温まろうよ。
お、なんだブレイクかよ。話せるじゃん殿下。
ああ、てめえは除外に決まってんだろ。特権は功労者にのみ与えられるもんだ。焼却炉の前に来たけりゃそれ相応の貢ぎ物を持ってきやがれ。具体的に言うとリアカー1台分のゴミ袋な。
ひっでえ、生徒会応募。
Inami's complaints naturally fell on deaf ears. Tobimaru had been selected to lead the cleaning operation, and his words were final. If Kiyomi was to continue to push his buttons, he knew he would be on cleaning duty tomorrow, and the next day too.
さあ行くぞ。誰の趣味か知らねえがなぜか汁粉の缶が山ほどあってな。中華まんの一つでもあった方が気が利くってもんなんだがね。あれか、遭難用のチョコレートみたいなもんか。
Sweet red bean soup. I wonder who gave it to them.
ったくあいつの考えは未だにわかんねえな。
Sojiro reassured Tobimaru by saying that he thought the food would do just fine for everyone.
なんだよ、行かねえのか、掃除。
ああ、自分はここに残るよ。旦なら木の実の言うように葉を燃やせばいい。そこに池もある。火の始末なら安心だ。
This was clearly for Kinomi's benefit. Tobimaru furrowed his brow while Kinomi shivered from the cold.
俺は今友情ってもんを実感している。すげえな、真心って本当にあったんだ。くそ、待ってろしずき、今赤羽たちから芋を奪ってくる。
Shy to show his true feelings, Kinomi ran off to the neighboring group.
な、予想はしてたけどな。ほらよ。
Tobimaru pulled out a can from his jersey pocket, scratching his head in exasperation. Excavation? Is that just the wrong word? Or did I say it right? I like exasperation seems like it fits here. But I think it's spelt wrong. I don't know. Anyway, he pulled out 3 in all, one from his jersey pocket and one from his pants pocket.
さっさと焚き火の用意をしようぜ。俺もこっちで休むことにするわ。
付き合いがいいのはお互い様だな。
Sojiro quickly prepared the leaves for the fire, carefully gathering them up for them to burn neatly.
慣れてるな。
マッチがあるから楽なんだ。
See, he's a mountain boy. Sojiro crouched down in front of the burning leaves and warmed his hands near the flames. Even though he showed no signs of being cold, underneath it all, Sojiro was cold too. He gazed into the fire as smoke rose from the pile of leaves, as if remembering the good times from his past. Tobimaru felt a touch of concern as he looked at Sojiro. He saw within him homesickness and retrospection. He also saw a dark shadow looming over him, like a stranger in a foreign land without a home.
元気ねえな、宗次郎。
Technically, that's not wrong.
まあね、少し疲れてる。
悩み事なら相談に乗るぜ。気が向いたら話してくれ。
Tobimaru continued speaking with the pull tab from the can of sweet bean soup still around his index finger. Sojiro was focused on the fire.
そういえばな、お前が学校休んでる時青崎に殴られたぜ。なんでも俺は大ボラ吹きだそうだ。
He got beat.
すごいな。大抜擢じゃないか。
Sometimes Sojiro will reply incoherently like this. Or we might have chalked it up to cultural differences.
なあ、青崎とはどうなってんだ？テスト前は駅まで一緒に帰ってただろ？うまくいってんのか、あれから。
It's obvious to everyone that that was far from the case, yet Tomura asked anyway.
ああ、今は一緒に住んでるよ。
Sojiro went with the truthful, blunt response.
ああ、そうか、一緒と来たか。
Tomura tried to laugh off Sojiro's all too casual confession, however.
一緒に住んでるぞ。
どうした飛び丸。火でも飛んだか？
飛んでねえし、それより怖え。おい、今の聞き捨てならねえたわごとは本当の話か？
Sojiro protested Tomura's reply with silence.
その余裕、マジか。女に興味なさそうな顔してて、やることやってんじゃねえかてめえ。
Tomura had always felt that he and Sojiro were an equal match strength-wise. For some reason, he could not shake the feeling that Sojiro was now his superior in the brain department. Sojiro cast a rare, angry glare in Tomura's direction.
こっちこそ聞き捨てならない。なんだ、その女に興味はないってのは。
Sojiro seemed genuinely angry, and his voice was icy. This uncharacteristic level of anger from Sojiro was enough to get Toyomaru to back down.
いや、悪い。そんな雰囲気あったんだよ、お前さんは。それは謝る。けどよ、青崎と一緒に住んでるってどういうことだ？いくらなんでも一足飛びすぎだろ。
別に君が期待しているようなことはない。彼女が住んでいるところの部屋を借りることになっただけだ。屋根の裏にある部屋なんだけど、板張りで山小屋を思い出すんで気に入ってる。
Toyomaru did not bat an eyelid at hearing that Sojiro now lived in the attic, and continued his questioning.
屋敷ってあの久遠寺の屋敷か？それこそまさかだぜ。宗十郎、お前一体どんな手品を使いやがった？
飛び丸こそあの家を知ってるのか？
そりゃな。これでも築地家期待の跡取り候補だぜ、俺は。久遠寺グループのご令嬢が住んでる屋敷ぐらいは知ってるさ。霊園女学院の2年生だろ。
久遠寺何？
Sojiro was looking more confused than ever, so Toyomaru reluctantly explained everything as simply as he could so Sojiro could understand.
久遠寺グループつうか財団だな。平たく言えば一族全部がお金持ちで仲良く会社を経営してる連中だと思えばいい。複合企業とまではいかないが輸出業じゃかなりのもんだ。ホームグラウンドは国外で先代の会長の英国 B 機がたたって一時期は沈みかけてたんだが、5年くらい前かね。本拠地をこっちに移してからはご存知の通りだ。会長が息子に移ってからはきちんと持ち直して今や町の名士だろ。ここでも久遠寺の名前はそこかしこで目に入る。この学校の立て直し予算の半分は連中からだしな。
Despite the oversimplified explanation, Sojiro still seemed to not be getting it. With that, Toyomaru decided to give up on trying to explain.
あれだ。想像もできない金持ちってこと。宗の字が働いてる喫茶店だって久遠寺が向こうから持ってきたブランドだぜ。今じゃ全国チェーンになっちまったがな。
つまりすごく偉いんだね。おかしいな。ならなんであんなに倹約してるんだろう。
Sojiro mumbled incoherently to himself. Toyomaru looked at him with a complex expression on his face, somewhere between envy and heartfelt sympathy.
しかしうまいことやったな、宗十郎。それで本当のところはどうなんだ？ 男と女が同じ屋根の下にいればやることは一つだろ。
案外古いな飛び丸も。
抜かせ。そのあたりをごまかしてたら男なんぞやってらんね
そりゃごもっとも。実を言うと
Sojiro and Alco were living together. There was absolutely no chemistry between them. But to say that living in such close quarters as they did, unintended mishaps did not occur from time to time. But even still,
驚くぐらいそういうことにはなってない。あの屋敷すごく広いし。
everyone was often busy with their own affairs, so there was no opportunity for that sort of thing to happen.
そもそもだな、もし飛び丸だったら下宿先が同じってことだけで青崎に言い寄る気になるかい？
え。いや、ならねえな。
But Mario nodded intently, as if he was thinking back over his many ex-relationships.
いやー、健全だな。
ああ、健全だろ。
Wholesome. Sojiro gave no more than a quick affirmation to Tobimaru's despondent murmur. He was doing fine. Besides his physical health, it was surely Sojiro's personality that enabled him to maintain any semblance of peace dealing with both Alco and Alice while living in that mansion.
でもそれとは別の話で青崎には頭が上がらないんだ。彼女にはもう返せない借りがあってさ。
Sojiro's eyes turned slightly serious as he stared into the fire. Tobimaru felt that there was more to those words than what Sojiro was living on.
もう返せない借りだ。
Sojiro merely nodded in silence at Tobimaru's inquisitive acknowledgement. And just then, a strange scream pierced through the still silence of the wood like a knife.
なんか聞こえたな。
ああ、木の実だ。
Sojiro had already stood up before he responded. He bolted to the frozen pond, broke the ice with his broom, and scooped up some of the frigid water in a bucket and threw it on the fire, all in less than 10 seconds. Tobimaru is a player who wasn't bound to our new king. Yeah, man, he's the prince. Then he immediately ran off into the depths of the woods from where he heard the scream. Tobimaru followed after him in panicked confusion.
飛び丸、この先に何かあるのか？
確か旧校舎が残ってるはずだ。
他には野犬の住処とかそういう嫌な話は？
はあ？いや、いるとしても鹿かウサギじゃねえか。
なら怖がることもないか。急ごう、飛び。
Perhaps because of his time spent growing up in the mountains, Sojiro quickly sprinted over the slippery dead leaves. Tobimaru was not particularly cautious himself, Sojiro. Nevertheless, he could not keep up with Sojiro in here. For long, Sojiro found himself running alone. When foliage blocked the natural trail, he would sometimes clear it away by brute force. But just as often, he would expertly weave through the brush. It was clear that he was used to dealing with this level of nature. After a few minutes, Sojiro arrived at a clearing. The wall of trees had ended. There was an obviously man-made clearing here on the mountainside. In the distance was what looked like an old wooden school building. It was a small, aesthetically pleasing building, no larger than an elementary school, lost in the depths of the winter wilderness.
木の実。
Yanomi stood alone at the old school's grounds.
は？なんでしずきまで追いかけてきたん？
Sour expression came over Sojiro's face as Kinomi tilted his head in confusion.
そっちこそどうしたんだ？変な声上げて。
声？いや、そりゃガキ相手に怒鳴ったけどよ。ほら、あのガキだよ。芋持ってるだろ。ってあ、中に逃げ込みやがった。
Kinomi pointed resentfully toward the old school building. There was indeed somebody standing at the entrance to the building, just over 300 feet in the distance.
たく、こんな上まで来やがって。いつから子供の遊び場になってんだ、ここ。
Kinomi shrugged his shoulders to signal how little he cared what the young children did with their time. This place was deep in the woods, but it was not particularly dangerous. Are you sure it's a kid? Sojiro had run through the wood to get here, but there was also a paved road leading to this spot from outside the woods too. Kinomi apparently followed that road to get here.
ん？子供？
Sojiro squinted.
ああ、金髪なんでさっきはちょっと驚いたけどな。外国人の子供ってなんか怖いだろ？
It's indeed quite rare to see a foreigner in a provincial town such as Misaki. Sojiro had never even seen a foreigner in person, which made the whole thing even more mysterious.
それで木の実はなんでここまで？
いや、赤羽たちがよ、ガキに食料奪われたって言うからここまで追いかけてきたんだ。そういうことだから、二人がかりであのお子様とっちめようぜ。
怖いことを考えるな、木の実は。
Sojiro could not find it in him to agree with this plan. It seemed unfair to team up against a little kid.
いいから帰ろう。あの子こっちを睨んでるじゃないか。それに飛び丸にこんなところ見られたら、冬休み中ずっと山の掃除で終わることになるぞ。
Sojiro took Kinomi by the shoulders and began leading him back to the path he came from. Kinomi cast one last gaze at the old school building before reluctantly following. Just then, Tobimaru appeared, panting and out of breath.
早いな、宗十郎。
Tobimaru could hardly catch his breath. He arrived about 3 minutes behind Sojiro, despite having a good set of legs on him.
それでどうした？木の実、無事か？
はあ？無事も何も殿下こそどったん。
Kinomi seemed perplexed at Tobimaru's first ever display of concern for him.
なんだそりゃ。てめえ、あれだけの大声を上げておいて、しらばっくれる気か？上で何かあったんだろうが。
すまない。こっちの早とちりだった。飛び丸は知らないだろうけど、木の実は時々、バイト先でも規制を上げる癖があるんだ。
Kinomi looked disapproving at Sojiro nonchalantly. As Sojiro nonchalantly shared this insight, it was the first he had ever heard of it.
怪しいな。
Must be a
ま
Neko
た
arc.
よからぬことでも企んでるんじゃねえか、そこの。
I just realized Neko arc is like the Doro back in the old day, huh?
ないよ。戻って掃除の続きをするぞ。
Sojiro pat Tobimaru on the shoulder a couple of times and started walking. Tobimaru cast a doubtful glare in his direction as he meandered off. He had a feeling that Sojiro was covering for Kinomi somehow.
まさか、旧校舎に火なんてつけてないだろうな。
誰もしないよ、そんなことは。
Sojiro kept walking and did not even look back at Tobimaru as he spoke. Tobimaru and Kinomi tilted their heads in confusion as they reluctantly followed the unusually aggressive Sojiro back to their cleaning spot. So the special winter cleaning team's activities ended uneventfully. The time was 3 in the afternoon. Upon departing, Kinomi and his crew invited Sojiro to come hang out with them. He declined politely due to his job that evening. He had about 2 hours until his shift began. Not quite enough time to do anything fun, but just enough time to have to fill it with something. Ah, I know that feel. That's like when you have classes and they're like 2 hours apart. Damn. Sojiro thought about relaxing in a park somewhere, but quickly changed his mind after remembering how cold it was, even in the city. Not to forget that Alcor handed him those pills in the morning. Alcor was absolutely correct in a prediction. Heading back to the mansion now would be just a waste of time. There was no reason for him to return to the mansion until after his shift at work. Still, Sojiro found himself on the way back anyway. Having grown up deep in the mountains, a little 2-hour walk was really no sweat off his back. Misaki is one of the more quiet residential areas in Misaki City. The only thing that really stood out here was Shioi Nuzuka. It's a hill that led directly into the woods. The silhouette of the mountains served as a backdrop to suburbia, silently overshadowing the small human actions of the people who lived here. Even in this modern day of technological progress, the people here were always careful to pay reverence to the nature around them. If that mansion were a shrine, it would not be a haunted house, but a famous tourist attraction.
というより、今更気づいたけど。
The houses around Shioi Nuzuka were all magnificent. Sojiro understood as he looked from the bottom of this hill, where the rest of the town lived at the roof of the mansion tucked away in the woods. He understood what Tomomaru was talking about, and how about how the Kuonji family who owned that mansion might be the richest people in town.
その割に家賃を取るところを見ると、やっぱり嫌われていると見るべきか。
Sojiro began walking towards the mansion with such thoughts simmering in his mind. The feeling of the hard asphalt beneath his feet instead of soft dirt felt lonely and isolating. He walked along the paved road for 10 minutes or so before reaching the iron fence of the wood. I think it's like the family has money, but she personally doesn't have money or something. There's gotta be something like that. Beyond this fence was the private property of the Koenji family. Otherwise, why would she be so stingy with money? Yeah. It was bereft of any awkward no trespassing signs. The tall, overbearing iron fence was more than enough to remind visitors that they were unwelcome there. Or they spend all the money doing magic stuff or age stuff, wizard stuff, whatever you call it. It's not magic. Sojiro casually pushed on the iron gate. Only 2 days had passed since the end of final exams, and he already seemed more than comfortable with the idea of entering this wood alone. The path in the mansion from inside the wood curved and bent like a snake. It took about 15 minutes to reach the mansion on this path. He could have chosen to ignore the long incline and travel in a straight line through the wood, but it would have expended significantly more energy in doing so. Using the wooden path was the sensible option. Nope, it did. Barring an emergency. Upon entering the foyer, that's it, Sojiro heard a conversation coming from the drawing room. There was no doubt Aoko and Alice. Sojiro decided to join them. Ever since the final exams had ended, Aoko and Alice had switched from their daily routine to a more irregular schedule. Aoko would disappear into Alice's room in the west wing of the mansion for a while, where she would remain. And Alice would go into Aoko's room, not to be seen again. They're swapping places for some reason? Okay. They would vanish into the corridors leading around to the rear of the mansion, doing who knows what, where Sojiro was most certainly not allowed to enter. Not that he was interested in what they were doing, since Aoko and Alice did not seem to want to include him either, serving both parties nicely. For the time being, the Kuonji estate was pretty peaceful.
Tadaima.
Sojiro quietly opened the door to the drawing room. Even though they tried not to be involved in each other's business, Sojiro made it a habit to greet them. The two girls sat across from him on the sofa. On the table in front of them was a large, extravagantly decorated mirror. Aoko was dressed for comfort, wearing jeans instead of her usual skirt. In stark contrast, Alice was dressed in unusual all black. I don't know about you guys, but wearing jeans is not comfortable for me. I'd have thought, Aoko would be more comfortable in her skirt than jeans, but yeah, alright. Even though the break from school was well underway, the witch still insisted on wearing black. As Aoko had explained, it was probably because it was too much effort for Alice to wear anything else. Sojiro's thought was that he would like to see her wear something different. Aoko and Alice seemed to be in the middle of some sort of dispute. The air in the drawing room was tense. They both ignored his greeting. Alice only briefly looked up at him.
じゃあ、東川の視点は？あそこの柱は白色だし、そう簡単には奪われないでしょ？
ええ。今のところ東川は侵食されていないけど、一つ隣の鈴穂の視点が消された以上、楽観はできないわ。残りの割り出しは今までより早くなる。
そっか。一個釣れれば、あとは芋づる式だもんね。
Are you talking about ley line points or something?
反省したわ。甘く見てたのはこっちの方だった。ここからは、1週間単位の攻防になるわね。
To be the most comfortable at home is being butt naked. The two continued their heated discussion from opposite sides of the table. Aoko neglected to even glance up at Sojiro. Sojiro sensed that she wanted to concentrate on the discussion at hand.
でも解せないな。あの夜に人形を出してくるタイミングといい、隠し方だけは一級品なうちの視点を短期間で特定することといい、こいつ、まず間違いなく市内にアジトを敷いてるわよね。 なのに、なんで結界に異常がないんだろう。三崎市一帯の索敵網は、もう100年近く破られたことがないのに。
Oko bit her nails nervously while Alice nodded along. Seemed as though she was wondering the same thing.
母もここの結界には触れなかった。岬の結界をかいくぐるにはあなたのおじいさんかそれ以上の技量を持つ魔術師でないと難しい。けどそれほどの魔術師なら逆に気配は隠しきれない。何か特殊な音響法かもしれないわね。ここ数年新しいサークルの話は聞かないけど。
何？シャーウッドの森？メイキングなら以前アリスの霧が粉砕したじゃない。あれ以上の音響があるっていうの？
例えばの話よ。今回の相手はこちら以上の技量を持っているか、こちらの知らない技術を持っているか。どちらにせよ評価を改めるべきね。私たち気づかないうちに追い詰められているのかも。
Two fell silent. Sojiro, after some internal deliberation, decided to break the silence.
や、ただいま。
Oko finally looked out at him in response to his hesitant declaration.
いいからお風呂に入ってきたら。汚れてるわよ、そう。
The Oko returned her gaze to the mirror. Oh, so cold. Alice briefly looked up at Sojiro again before also returning her gaze to the mirror. Perhaps feeling at least somewhat satisfied that his greeting was acknowledged, Sojiro left the drawing room and closed the door behind him. Oko's right. His clothes were a little soiled.
そうだな。もったいないけど、確かに。
Sojiro returned to his room thinking that a bath might actually feel pretty nice in this cold weather, despite not really having broken a sweat at all during the day. He climbed the stairs from the foyer and up the second flight into the attic. Like the other rooms in the mansion, this one had no frills to its decor. It was a little cumbersome to use as a living space, comfortable enough for Sojiro. Everywhere else in the mansion was a little too gaudy for his tastes. As far as shelter and a place to sleep went, Sojiro was more than satisfied with his accommodations. There was no electricity in the attic. The only light was that which crept in from a small skylight. Not that Sojiro minded. He was more accustomed to living without electricity than living with it. With only the faint winter light to guide him, he readied a change of clothes and a towel before heading down to the foyer. Despite the magnificent size of the mansion, there was only one bath in the whole building, and not a particularly large one at that. Whoever the architect was, he or she must not have thought bath to be so important. Perhaps they were not the bath type. You know what this means? There's only one bath. Something's gonna happen. Sojiro descended to the foyer and made his way to the back of the stairs. He knocked on the door to the bath. As expected, there was no answer from the other side. The only other two occupants of this mansion were still talking in the drawing room. After confirming it was unoccupied, Sojiro quietly entered the bathroom. Even though Sojiro was not aware of it himself, as was common for him, the only hobby he had acquired since coming down from the mountain was taking a nice relaxing bath. Sojiro had left, but the two girls were still locked in their heated discussion. Needless to say, the topic of their conversation was still that of the outsider mage who had appeared in Misaki City last month. This was, after all, the problem that had occupied their time before this whole situation with Sojiro arose. Dealing with and eliminating the interloper who had set his or her sights on their territory.
今まではおとりにばっかり食いついてたから甘く見てたけど、それも計算づくだったのかしらね。こっちが油断してる隙に本命を一つ奪われた。この相手との戦いはこれからが本番ってことか。
The situation was growing more dire by the day. Until only a couple of days ago, the enemy had limited themselves to small skirmishes, but now they had shifted on to a full-on offensive. Oko had two major bounded fields she used for defense. One, the larger of the two, was placed around Misaki City to detect magical energy and magecraft. This was used to observe and monitor visitors from outside the city. It was initially set up by Awasaki's ancestors, the administrators of this territory, and no way to be removed. The other was set up to energize and manage ley lines within the territory. Oh no, my game died. My game's still alive, but the audio died. I think the capture card died. Hang on, I'm gonna unplug it and replug it back in. I think we need to restart. I think the heat from yesterday is still affecting me. So yeah. Quick BRB while I restart. My capture card died. Or you know, I might as well try plugging it back in. We'll see what happens. Pretty sure it's dead. It's dead. Okay. BRB. Okay, we're back. Oh my god. Alright. PC decided to do the thing where it just like takes forever to start up. Like, alright. Let me watch things and then we can get started again. Let's continue. Once my audio decides to switch. Five sigils carved into the earth made up a standard square type array, protecting all that lay within its bounds. Some manipulation of the mana flow, the power within was directed to accumulate at the Kuanji estate. That is to say, the bounded field existed to monopolize the magical energy within Misaki City. Time to buy expensive RAM and a non-existing 1690 from Nvidia. Nah, you know what? I need to like just stick an aircon in my room. That's it. 5 sigils in total, with the Kuanji estate located in the center. 5 sigils were forcibly removed. Alco's jurisdiction over this territory will be in title only. Without the power of the land to back them up, they will be forced to fight back against the invaders on equal grounds, with only their own innate abilities to protect them. The only reason Alice and the inexperienced Oracle were able to defend this territory so far was because of these 2 fields. The dragnet that notified Ahuzaki of any threats was also her lifeline. This time their enemy had somehow slipped into the cracks and was running rampant. This was what the girls had to face up to.
どちらにせよ時間の問題ね。視点がすべて潰されたら、いよいよここでの籠城になるけど、いいの？青子。
ん？別にいいんじゃないの？アリスの言う通り、残りの視点を消されるのは時間の問題なんだし。そりゃ敵のアジトを発見できれば同じだけど、それは絶対必要ってわけでもないでしょ？視点を消されても私にはあんまり関係ないし。何より館の守りはあんたがいる限り万全だしね。
Repercussions to having the sigils destroyed,
あ
though.
っちの方からやってきてくれるなら、それこそ飛んで火にいるよ。他に心配事なんてないでしょ？
そうね。敵が一人だけなら、その時は鏡の範囲をここに集中させて戦場にすればいい。
What's she going to say?
そうね。敵が一人だけなら、その時は鏡の範囲をここに集中させて戦場にすればいい。私たちにとってその方が有利だったわ。
Was that's official, I guess. Alice touched this mirror on the table with the pale fingers. The surface of the mirror rippled like water. The mirror was the protector of Misaki City, separate from Aozaki's bounded fields. Accurately, it was a ploy that existed only to protect Alice Kuanji, than Misaki City itself. It generated a thick fog and acted as an invitation to any visitors, drawing them into its board game-like world. Alice referred to it only as the Mirror, but it was known to her friends as the Mirror of Slumber. This was a magecraft that Alice Kuanji wielded. Within the rippling surface of the mirror, an image of the castle began to form, and also a lush forest, field, and a river. Uncle stared at the mirror in silence, before suddenly jumping to her feet off the sofa.
そうと決まれば、あとは行動あるのみね。出かけるわよ、アリス。とにかく現場を見ないことには始まらない。
let out a tired sigh in response to Alco's determination, then gave the mirror a gentle caress. The sound of dripping water filled the room. The mirror began to consume the table in a thick fog, a single caress from Alice.
順番に回るのなら帰るのは朝になるわね。
まあまあ、そう億劫がらないで。
That's a lot of sigils, eh?
ところでアリス、火の五芒星の大挙ってこうだっけ？
Alco traced a shape in the air with her fingers. He mimed a star shape starting from the top, moving down and to the right, from there to the upper left, and so on.
そろそろ壊すこと以外も覚えないとダメよ、青子。
Alice sat up from the sofa, letting out a heavy sigh. They both took their coats from their hangers and left the drawing room.
失礼ね。私だって日々成長してるわよ。この間のおまじないだってちゃんと成功したんだから。
おまじない？
簡単な暗示の呪文。ほら、アリスが教えてくれた軽く弱くうまく早くチクタクチクタク急げや急げってやつ。
それ本当？
That's the one that she cast on Sojiro.
ほんともほんと。後で総重量に聞いてみなさい。
Alice swallowed her words, clearly displeased. She had likely stopped herself in time to realize it was not worth the effort to take issue with it.
けど留守中その彼はどうするの？
大丈夫でしょう。アリスの西館と開かずの間に入らなきゃ即死するようなことは。
Alco responded hastily as she opened the door to the foyer. As soon as she did, just as quickly as Alice's doubts had gotten stuck in her throat, Alco suddenly froze, unable to speak. For
ですって。
a moment, Alco wasn't sure who was standing before her. She could only stare at the glinting rays of sunlight creeping into the room as she reeled back from the shock. Her mind was completely blank. It was as if she had just woken up from a nap, but Jack in the Box had just opened in her face. Sojiro was probably the only person who truly knew how long that dumbfounded silence went on.
あんた、こんなところで何してるのよ、一体。
Alco finally found her voice.
何って着替えてるんだけど。
The scars on his arm, though. He's jacked, man. Sojiro's response was matter of fact. He offered no explanation as to why he was changing in the foyer and not the bathroom. Alco was too shocked to read him riot act. Sojiro was putting a shirt on after presumably just getting out of the bath. His neck was wrapped in bandages, and he was completely shirtless. You see the bandage, okay. His hair was wet, but his skin wasn't glistening from the steam of hot water. He must have washed himself with nothing more than cold water. Shocked as to why anyone would do such a thing in this cold weather, she let it slide. The source of her silent stupor was simply his body. Until now, she'd only seen him as a harmless. Without his clothing to hide him, however, he was more fit than she'd ever imagined. For a rough mountain upbringing where one's body and strength meant survival, perhaps he was even a bit underdeveloped. On top of that,
それ、傷跡なの？
Alco asked cautiously. Sojiro followed her gaze. He had something that looked like a burn scar on his arm. It was random in appearance, nothing like Alco's magic crest, with its ordered patterns.
ああ、これか。ずいぶん前に野犬の群れに襲われて噛みつかれたんだ。命があっただけでも幸運だから、傷跡ぐらいはご愛嬌だ。
A long time ago. It must be talking about when he was a child. Though his life was saved, it was apparent that he hadn't been able to receive proper treatment deep in the mountains where he lived. Those scars were proof of that. Considering it had happened so many years ago, it was likely they would never fade. If only for an instant. Alco thought the wild scars left on her skin suited his lean body perfectly.
確かに、あまり気持ちのいいものじゃないな。自分の部屋で着替えるべきだった。
Sojiro sounded slightly ashamed as he put on his shirt, looking at Alko standing there in cold silence. The two girls had no response. Sojiro headed for the stairs to go back to his room.
ちょっと待って、宗次郎。
Sojiro stopped and turned around.
なんていうか。
Her expressions, man. Alko looked away awkwardly, apparently not knowing why she had stopped him herself.
なんか青崎らしくない。さっきから変だけど、熱でもあるんじゃないのか？あれから満足に寝てないだろう、二人とも。
He was of course referring to the final exams. From Sojiro's perspective, the amount of work Alko put in seemed strange.
熱なんてないったら。そうじゃなくて、どうしてこんなところで着替えてたのよ、あんたは。
Alko was doing her best to keep up appearances. But for some reason, Sojiro was hesitant to say too much more.
それは、言いづらいんだが、下着の管理はきちんとした方がいいと思う。どっちだかは知らないけど。
Those underwear in the bathroom. Alice had been completely silent behind Alko, couldn't resist responding to that statement. Although she hadn't wanted to get involved, this was something she couldn't ignore.
言っておくけど、それは青子だから。
Alice's response was quick and to the point.
洗濯の当番は確かに私だったけど。
Alko seemed like she was just holding back on going critical.
とにかく、もうすぐアルバイトだから着替えてくる。
Sensing that those two were probably about to get into an argument, Sojiro took his chance to leave. And with that, Sojiro briskly left the scene.
アリス。
とりあえず、片付けてくるわ。
Alice calmly walked into the bathroom. A few minutes later, just as the two were about to head out and fulfill their duties as mages, Alko remembered something she wanted to ask.
そうだ、アリス。傷ってあれのこと？
あれは傷跡じゃないわ。だって、あんなにも誇らしいもの。
Alko agreed. What impressed her the most about those scars was how he treated them simply as part of his past, absent of any regret. Alko wouldn't have gone so far as to say he was proud, but it seemed her instincts had been correct. That and one more thing.
でも一つだけはっきりしたわ。それじゃあ、不覚にも見惚れてたのは私一人じゃなかったってことよね、アリス。
Is this what Alice was taken aback when he woke up that morning? Alko smiled wryly at Alice, like a child who knew they were doing something they shouldn't with their friend. Alice was trying to ignore her as best as she could. She looked away without saying a word. Alko let out a satisfied snicker and began walking towards the front door.
じゃあ、行こうか。まずはあの公園からでいいでしょ。今回の件は、あそこから全てが始まったわけだし。
He was talking about the local park in Misaki. The place where they had run into the enemy puppets and, of course, where their involvement with Sojiro had all begun. The next morning. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Most people were still in their beds sleeping. Although some 24-hour convenience stores had opened last year, Misaki Town was still very much living in the good old days of the early 80s. Even the tofu shop in the shopping district, known for opening earlier than anywhere else, didn't open until 6. But this was the late 80s, during the latter half of Japan's bubble economy. Okay, there's your timestamp, late 80s. There was a time when metropolitan areas never slept. Those in the countryside, however, remained in the past. The roads were blanketed in silence, the streets were empty of commuters, and not a single automobile could be heard. The sun was just barely peeking over the horizon. The town would still be asleep for at least an hour longer before it began waking up. It was during this time that someone stepped onto the Kuanji estate. Sojiro was working the late shift during winter vacation, and had just come home. He moved quietly through the drawing room so he wouldn't wake up Alko and Alice, who were presumably still asleep. Kuonji Estate had a few established rules. One of those rules forbade more Japanese tea. This new rule had only come into effect 3 days prior. It was proposed after Alice saw Sojiro drinking green tea in the kitchen after dinner one night. Looking back on it, the decision had been made rather abruptly. A single gasp of surprise was all Alice said. She grasped her head as if she was battling the most vicious of migraines, called for alcohol, then made the decision to ban all Japanese teas from this mansion. By some miracle, alcohol managed to negotiate and keep Sojiro's privileges to barley tea during the summer.
だいたいイギリス産だって初めはグリーンティーが主流だったじゃない。
Damn, what is this? Tea, no Japanese tea, what? Alco had clearly hit a nerve with this argument. Alco stared at Alice, fairly certain why she was so taken aback by Sojiro's actions.
そこまで嫌がらなくてもな。お茶はなんだって美味しいのに。
Sojiro grumbled to himself while sipping his hot green tea. He's drinking green tea! He didn't realize that Alice was upset because he had poured his green tea into a teacup meant for black tea. Ah, that's why. In Sojiro's defense, the only teacup that Alice had given him permission to use. At any rate, the early morning was his to enjoy. This was his moment to relax with the Japanese tea he'd smuggled in. He didn't use the time to read books or watch TV. He just drank his tea, gazed fondly at the garden, or rather, the dense woods outside. Sojiro simply sat, relaxed, and let his mind wander. What happened to that broom that he bought? An hour passed. Just as he was beginning to feel refreshed, he heard sounds coming from the foyer. He knew it was Alco and Alice talking, so he rushed to hide his teapot, and tea leaves in the kitchen. Hiding the contraband was easy enough, considering just how many unused shelves there were in the kitchen. Sojiro was perturbed by how they wasted the potential of such a splendid kitchen.
あら、早いのね、宗十郎。
Alco spoke as she took off her white down jacket. Next to her, Alice silently took off her black coat.
いや、今帰ってきたんだ。天城浜の食品工場に深夜のパートで入ることになって。
Sojiro stuck his head out from the kitchen and gestured that he was about to put some water on boil. Alice tilted her head slightly at him. Big brain, right? Just give Sojiro his own cup and all problems solved. Yes, but the cup is meant for black tea. That's why Alice sees it as she gets triggered. He's drinking green tea from the black tea cup. It wasn't that she thought his gesturing was funny or anything like that.
天城浜から
Alice glanced up at the clock in the drawing room, and her expression darkened.
どうしたのアリス。
Uncle asked this from her comfortable seat on the sofa.
別に
Alice responded indifferently before finally sitting down as well.
宗十郎、砂糖は一杯だけだからね。
Uncle yelled her matter-of-course request into the kitchen. Sojiro didn't respond, but it was an affirmative silence. This was the result of 2 entire nights worth of cramming that Alice knew nothing about.
アリスは？
私はミルクだけでいいけど。
Alice responded out of obligation.
了解、ミルクティーだね。
For some reason, Sojiro dutifully answered Alice's request.
ま、いいけど、いちいち突っ込んでたらキリがないし。それより珍しいじゃない。アリスがティーバッグのお茶飲むなんて。
今日は疲れたから、たまには。
It seemed she had allowed herself to accept another kindness, at least for today.
ま、いいか。それより宗十郎、あんた、さっきおかしなこと言わなかった？
As this joke continues, Sojiro sees Alice drinking red tea or black tea.
え、別に言ってないぞ、そんな。
そう、ならいいんだけど。
There's something weird, but the two are conversing over a distance of 4 yards. Alice decided to add her opinion to the conversation.
しずきくんがおかしなことを言わない日はないと思うわ、私。
Quiet tone was luckily just low enough that Sojiro couldn't hear from the kitchen. I think they're talking about how he said he went to work at like fucking wherever the fuck it was. Where did he say? Amagihama. What the fuck is Amagihama? I guess it must be outside of their jurisdiction. It must be outside of Misaki City.
そりゃそうだけど、今ちょっと変だったでしょ？いや、何が引っかかったのかまではわからないんだけどさ。
そうね。会話自体は普通だったけれど、内容を考えてみると、どこかおかしいわね。
Alko became gradually more irritated as she failed to grasp what had been odd about the conversation. Just then, Sojiro appeared holding a tray with a teacup for each of them.
何を話してるんだ？単に新しいアルバイトを始めただけだろ。
Put the cups down on the black table without making even the slightest sound. Alice couldn't complain about how proper his job as a waiter had made him. But she didn't say anything out loud. She did nod in his direction to show some gratitude. Alko, however,
天城浜だっけ？あそこってスタジアムがあるところでしょ？ツアーの会場になるから時々行くけど。
Student council president, a supposed model student, loved rock bands. Alko was secretly obsessed with a number of bands and used to travel way out of town just to see them perform live when she was in middle school. Of course, this was a world that Sojiro was far from familiar with.
それより、また新しいバイト始めたんだ。そんなに働いてどうする気なのよ、宗十郎は。
ああ、よく聞いてくれたね。本人の名誉のために名前は伏せるけど、誰かさんと誰かさんが俺の少ない収入を無慈悲に奪っていくから働く先を増やしたんだ。
Because there are a couple of people in my life who like to take all my money away from me for every little thing you can imagine. This was as much resistance as Sojiro was able to give. Ko lifted a teacup to her mouth, as if she was completely oblivious to Sojiro's monologue.
それは大変ね。
Alice said this as she set her teacup down quietly. There were some things she just did not understand. Alko had to hold back her laughter as she looked at Alice and Sojiro.
言った自分が未熟だった。
Sojiro's shoulders fell as he said this. He took a sip of his black tea, still unsure about the taste.
まあ、アルバイトが多いって分かってくれるだけでいいか。そういったわけだから、冬休み中は夜も留守にする。例の薬はアルバイト先で飲むしかないんだけど。
ああ、それなら心配いらないわ。もうあれはやめたから。いちいち作るのも面倒だし、もっとしずきくんに似合うのを見つけてきたの。
Ko had a huge ominous grin on her face. She put her hand into her jacket pocket and pulled out a little paper bag. Sojiro just wants NES since this is the 80s. There's a small circular object about 20 inches in diameter, wrapped up nicely like a present.
はい、これは入居祝い。これからはそれをつけておくのよ、宗十郎。
Sojiro opened the paper bag. Inside was a white belt. But it wasn't a belt for putting around your waist to keep your pants up. To put it as clearly as possible, it was a collar.
青子。
Alice's expression darkened at this turn of events. It wasn't clear whether it was her friend's insidiousness or sympathy for Sojiro that concerned her.
どう？気に入った？
Alko was clearly a little crazy. At least she wasn't totally serious. It was obvious that it was at least half a prank to just see how Sojiro would react. But Sojiro was solemnly considering the collar he had just been gifted.
意味はつかみかねるけど、こういうものを人からもらうのはこれが初めてだ。
Oh, he's actually seeing it as a gift! It actually sounded like this would be a happy memory for him. Alice narrowed her eyes at what was transpiring.
けどこれは何に使うんだ？
He doesn't know what to use it for. Ah,
簡単
okay.
よ。金庫寺と同じで飼い犬が主人に逆らうと首を絞めるの。あっちは頭につけてたけど、それよりは首のがマシでしょ。
Sojiro grimaced when he finally understood Aoko's mean-spirited gift. He really wanted to ask her what kind of person comes up with such an evil idea. Okay, now he gets it.
つまり秘密をばらしたり逆らったりしたら首が締まると。やっぱり熱でもあるんじゃないのか、青崎は。
あら、首輪は嫌？せっかく宗十郎に似合いそうなものを見つけたのに。
Aoko still had an evil grin on her face. Sojiro had a surprising response to this gift that Aoko had clearly gotten as a prank.
それもそうか。毎日毒を飲むよりはマシだし、このベルト自体いいものだし。うん、気に入った。ありがとう、青崎。
Tell him with kindness! He spoke 100% truthfully. Aoko's face contorted in disbelief, as she could only mumble if he was serious.
人の行為はどんなものだって嬉しいよ。それに、それが青崎ならなおさらだ。
And with that, Sojiro put the belt around his neck. He placed it over the bandages already there.
こんな感じかな。きついけどそのうち慣れるだろう。
Despite his words to the contrary, Sojiro tugged at the belt uncomfortably and adjusted it. It was such a perverse scene that even Aoko's face was red as beet, even though this had all been her idea. Perhaps it was because it gave her such a clear reminder of the scars she had seen the day before.
よし。止め方はこれでいいのか。
I didn't even see it actually.
ね、
When the other person has a stronger fetish than yourself. Aoko retreated guiltily as Sojiro came closer to her for her to check the fit of his new collar.
黙ってちゃわからないのに。いいよ。アリスに聞くから。
Sojiro shifted his gaze from Aoko to Alice. Alice stared intently at Sojiro wearing his new collar and said,
ロックね。青子、趣味に走りすぎよ。
He could not have put it any more bluntly.
いや、やかましい、そんなんじゃない。もういい。とにかくそういうことよ。これからはその首輪が薬の代わりよ。せいぜい秘密を守ることね。
Aoko was oddly emphatic, and she spoke before stomping off towards the hallway.
それと、これからお昼まで仮眠を取るけど、くだらないことで起こしたら殺すから。
Aoko slammed the door behind her as she left the drawing room. Sojiro stared in amazement.
なんで青崎はいつもいきなり怒るんだろ
It just backfired on her. She got embarrassed, that's why. He murmured to himself, forgetting that Alice was standing right there in front of him.
しずきくんには悪意が通じないからでしょう。気にする必要はないわ。
う。悪意って今のが？
Alice looked up at Sojiro's innocent response. It was like glimmer that showed surprise at her current actions.
なんでもないから気にしないで。
That terse reply, she returned to her usual expressionless self. There was no use explaining Aoko's feelings. Aoko bought that collar for the sole purpose of annoying Sojiro and causing mischief. But things didn't turn out how she'd planned. Her conscience got the better of her. Sojiro mistakenly thought that Aoko was angry at him, but in reality she was only angry at herself. Alice didn't bother telling Sojiro all these heartwarming details though. Because it was too much work, just because she was never one to have meaningless conversation. That was how she had been raised.
しずきくんはこれからどうするの？
Alice suddenly changed the topic. Sojiro thought for a while before replying.
夕方までゆっくりするよ。ここのところ忙しすぎた。せっかくだからテレビも見ていたいし、お昼には青崎を起こさないといけないだろ。
そう。なら静かにしていて。
She let out a gentle sigh and rose to her feet. Just keep her quiet. Sojiro would understand exactly what she meant by those words in just a few minutes. Sun shining through the window was bright. It was just about 9 o'clock. Time for the morning television programs to get going. Sojiro was sitting on the sofa, staring out the window at the scene outside. The view from the neighboring sunroom showed a courtyard in a state of disrepair. Sojiro could appreciate the outdoors in both its natural wild state and when tamed by human hands.
あれは近いうちに何とかせねばなるまい。
Sojiro muttered to himself, turning another page in his textbook. On the table before him was a mathematics textbook and a notebook with Alco's name on it. At first glance, he appeared to be a diligent student studying on his day off. He was, in truth, only doing so as a compromise. He had given up on his main intent of watching the morning television shows. The reason why he gave up was simple. He was being considerate of Alice, who sat in front of him with her nose buried in a book. Instead of holding herself up in her room, she had brought out her old dusty book to read. This is what she meant when she had said to keep quiet. Sojiro found it difficult to turn on the TV.
とりあえずしばらくテレビは控えよう。
With that decided, Sojiro resigned himself to reviewing some of the practice problems he had gotten wrong. In the drawing room for some reason. There wasn't any particular purpose in doing it there. He also had no reason to study back in his room. So there he was, leisurely highlighting his textbook with Alice there in the same room. To Sojiro, there really was no difference between his room and the attic. In the attic, and the drawing room with Alice. To be fair, he could probably live with a tiger as long as it didn't cause any trouble. That was both Sojiro's biggest strength and his biggest weakness. Before he knew it, the clock was showing 11. He had spent 2 hours doing his math problems, wasn't even halfway finished. More than that, he was disappointed in himself for lacking the courage to speak up at all.
それに比べて青崎は頑張ってる。
He dropped his mechanical pencil onto the notebook, watched it roll away. He knew that Alco and Alice were busy with something else, since final exams had ended. He also knew that she had hardly gotten any sleep recently. If she had been able to ignore him during exams, she probably would have had an easier time. Today's nap was probably the first proper sleep Alco had gotten in days. Though she showed no signs of exhaustion, despite the fact that she must have hit peak long ago, she always seemed raring to go. It wasn't that she was trying to act soft. That was just the kind of person she was. Always positive, always tough as nails. And that was exactly why she came off as completely irrational at times. If that was the case, you could probably describe Alice in exactly the same way. Sojiro couldn't help but feel a bit inadequate when he saw their single-minded focus on their goals. He'd been so preoccupied with adjusting to his new life that he'd neglected to think about what he was going to do with himself after. Thinking about this cast a gloomy cloud over his heart. He felt like he'd never find a clear purpose in life like Alco and Alice seemed to have. At least not since he'd left the mountains. His old life was gone now, never to return. Really? Wouldn't he just go back to the mountains? It's like a kite cut from its string, destined to fly only where the winds took it. But without anything to ground him, he couldn't do anything about the empty future lay ahead. He could only let himself fly where the currents took him, slowly losing sight of the ground below.
そうだな。便利なものは溢れているけど、本当に望むものは。
The town was full of options. He could find nothing. He asked himself the same questions time and time again. It never made him feel any better. If anything, it made him feel worse and worse. You know, unless it's the fact that he was found out by the government and now has to pay taxes. That makes sense, I guess. It's very real though. A bit too realistic. That or maybe he felt that lamenting his own ineptitude would lead to finding some kind of goal or desire someday. Tired of his own sniveling, Sojiro dejectedly closed his notebook. He looked up and saw his own face reflected at him in the TV screen. His new collar was there around his neck, looking as out of place as ever. Perhaps a fool like him who felt weak when faced with others' strength did need to wear a collar after all.
まったくだ。悩むのは一丁前になってから。
He shook off his thoughts of doom and gloom and sat up straight. Just psyching himself up a little, he stood up from the sofa.
よし。何か作るけど、アリスは？
Sojiro asked casually. Well, Sojiro had been doing his own thing, yet remained mindful of Alice. Alice looked up, surprised at hearing her name. She had completely forgotten Sojiro was even there.
私？
ああ。アリス、朝から紅茶しか飲んでないだろ？どうせ作るなら、いっぱい作った方がお得なんだ。
Without waiting for her reply, Sojiro headed off to the kitchen, putting on his apron. Alice tried to wave at him to stop, but by then he'd already disappeared into the kitchen. He was hesitant to walk all the way in there just to tell him she didn't need anything. Besides, she was actually hungry. Sojiro's proposal made sense, and her empty stomach agreed. Alice was hungry. Sojiro was going to make lunch. Making lunch for both of them would save the time and trouble of cooking two separate meals. There was no logical reason for Alice to refuse his gesture. He decided to stay quiet and tacitly accept his offer.
変な人。
He whispered the words softly, not for anyone in particular to hear but herself. The truth was, however, Alice had been in a bad mood all morning. After checking all the sigils around Misaki City and boarding the first train back from Tokawa, all she wanted to do was spend the rest of her days reading until the words turned into a jumble. Her resolve to complete this task would not be interrupted by someone else milling about in the drawing room. This was her mansion, and there was no way she was going to lock herself up in her room on account of Sojiro. However, with that said, she knew it would be wrong to kick Sojiro out for no reason. As it stood, Sojiro had actually kept quiet like she asked. He wasn't in the wrong here. If Alice had really wanted to be alone, she should have gone to her room.
静かにしてじゃなくて一人にさせてと言うべきだった。
Alice had defiantly stayed in the drawing room despite realizing the dilemma she put herself in. She had figured Sojiro would eventually make a ruckus and run off to hide in his attic room. Her assumption could not have been more wrong. Sojiro never left the drawing room. But she had actually stopped caring that he was there. Though he hadn't paid her any attention, he hadn't ignored her either. They had simply sat in silence together without any awkwardness. Alice felt the freedom of being alone, along with the comfort of someone being by her side. To put it into words, Sojiro was just that kind of person. It was probably the only reason Alice had been able to sleep so soundly with him there next to her. Sojiro continued cooking in the kitchen, oblivious to the thoughts that went through Alice's head. She couldn't see him from the drawing room, but she could easily imagine him cooking in the kitchen. Hey First Dylan, what's up? How you doing?
変な人ね。
Alice resumed reading after unwittingly stating her feelings out loud a second time. Sunlight beaming into the drawing room showed that it was noon. Sunlight actually looked warm, despite it being a cloudy winter day. Did you play FGO before at EOS? Is there something to play right now? Like I know there was a patch going on. I might play the ending chapter. I think there is an ending chapter, right? Whatever the ending is, I might play it on stream. Last chapter today. Okay. So it came out already. Maybe next week. Right now, Arknights has got nothing on. It's just IS. I might play IS in my own time. So maybe next week. Just as noon struck, Sojiro returned to the drawing room with two sets of plates. Some food of an indescribable color was piled on the large, cream-colored plates.
これは
So, what is this? She hadn't expected much. Since she also hadn't requested anything, she could just refuse it if it was something she didn't want. But this food left her at a loss for words, despite psyching herself up.
これは何？
Alice spoke as though she was terrified of what had been placed before her.
何って焼きうどんに何かかけてみた。
If Alco had been there, she probably would have punched him. But Sojiro just confidently placed 2 large plates on the table. Is it really bad cooking? Being billowed from the mountain of food like an angry volcano ready to erupt at any moment. Spicy! The thick mystery sauce flowed over the plates as magma might from said eruption. And below it all were a seemingly infinite number of slimy tentacle-like noodles. There was really nothing more to say about it. This was clearly the food of a poor, struggling student who favoured quantity over quality. All that was required was a basic recipe, the will to cook something, and what few ingredients were needed. A pile of stir-fried noodles with sauce splattered on top, so horrifically bad, it was almost an art form. This is a bachelor's cooking, if she'd ever seen it. There was really nothing else you could call it. He had wondered what he was doing for an hour in there, and it turned out he was been making the sauce. The sauce would have been fine, but Sojiro had wholeheartedly gone an extra mile. I see, this is why Sojiro isn't the cook in the Chinese restaurant. Sojiro bowed his head slightly and picked up his chopsticks. He had brought a fork for Alice. The fork! The fork is way. She picked up the fork and stuck it into the noodles, half drowning in sauce. Sojiro began eating, not seeming to care that Alice sat there looking like she was about to eat poison. Seeming to view this as a challenge, Alice furrowed her brow and slowly brought the mass of noodles to her mouth. I was like, where should I start? It's a little salty and ugly to look at. Tastes all that bad. If anything, it was actually pretty good. Okay.
一つ
Okay,
聞きたいんだけど
it's not spicy or bad, it just... it's just not refined. Sojiro put down his chopsticks and turned to speak to Alice.
実際の話魔術師の話はともかくとして青崎はまだ誰にも手を出してないんじゃないか
Alice looked up quietly at the sudden question. She had been inspecting Sojiro's meal. Now she looked straight at him.
おかしなことを聞くのね、しずきくんは。
アリスには悪いけどこれは青崎本人には聞きようのないことだから言いたくなければ答えないでくれ
Alice didn't respond. Sojiro resumed eating, seeming disappointed. Alice stared blankly at him, slurping his noodles. After much hesitation, she replied.
しずきくんの言う通り、青子はまだ人を殺したことはないわ。その行為自体は何回かこなしてはいるけれど。
Alice's response was slow and measured. Sojiro still looked troubled. But not the conversation they were having, but he looked apologetic towards Alice. He'd said she didn't have to answer if she didn't want to. But Alice kept talking despite the face he was making.
しずきくんが見た公園での出来事が青子にとって初めての殺人行為よ。あいにく相手は人形だったけど。
What's up? How you doing? Sojiro silently nodded. Alice narrowed her eyes at him suspiciously.
まるで初めから分かっていたそぶりね。
そうじゃないやそうなのかなたまにその手のセリフを言うけど何か違う気がしたんだだから多分青崎はまだ人殺しというのを体験していないんじゃないかってでもまあそんなことよりもっと確かなのは
しずきくんが今生きているということね。
Sojiro chuckled at Alice's stellar response. The plate of Joe's exactly. Things would have been more clear-cut that night if Alco had actually killed someone before. Sojiro would have been dead before he ever even saw her face. For better or for worse, Alco remained inexperienced in spite of her ruthlessness and decisiveness. Sojiro relaxed his shoulders. His stern face gradually returned to its normal carefree state. Then,
でもそんなことは関係ないわ。あの子はそのあたりが異常だから。行為は理性に、経験は知識でたやすく補ってしまう。そうね。青子はその気になれば迷うことなく人の命に手を出せる。
With that, Alice went back to twirling noodles around her fork. It looks like she's having fun, Sojiro thought, as he ruminated over what she'd just said. He was rational enough to accept herself, despite acting against society's morals. Possessed an intellect that exceeded even the confidence gained through experience. Had Alco been raised to utilize her logic and reason to forge reality from fiction? If that was the case, then they really were different from Sojiro.
すまない。こんなことを聞いたのは青崎には内緒にしておいてくれないか。
Sojiro seemed serious, as if he really regretted asking. Alice's expression remained unchanged. She had never intended on saying anything to Alco anyway.
ありがとう。なんだかアリスには内緒話ばかり溜まっていくね。
Tony dumping stamina on it, but not using apples for it. Sojiro went back to eating his food. Alice had still only had a single bite. He was already scraping his clean.
そういえば青崎にも聞いたんだけど、アリスと青崎はいつもああなのか？
Sojiro had suddenly decided to change the topic of conversation. The new topic was rather cold and dry. The rather cold and dry relationship between Alco and Alice. Alco said their relationship was normal, but maybe Alice had a different opinion.
会話が少ないことを言っているのならそうなるわ。けど別に不便じゃないから。
So still twirling noodles with a fork, she gave her concise answer. The noodles went, none made it into her mouth.
不便じゃないって、そういうの仲がいいって言わないんじゃないのか。
私と青子の仲が良くないとしずきくんは困るの
Sojiro swallowed his words at Alice's perplexed reply. It would actually. They wasn't sure how to respond when asked so directly.
いや、なんかこっちの考え方が悪かったみたいだ。もうその話題には触れないことにしたから忘れてくれ。それより、アリス。
Sojiro gave Alice a piercing stare that was more intense than any time they'd talked before. Alice was taken slightly aback at the unusually intense look from his eyes. Her face became slightly flushed out of nervousness. Nobody besides Alco had ever stared at her like this before. Whether or not he noticed, Sojiro waited a few moments before speaking slowly and with complete conviction.
それ、食べないなら欲しいんだけど。
So serious, man. An awkward silence followed.
悪いけどこれ私のだから。
He had cooked it, sure. Alice wasn't wrong. He had made it for her after all. There was a slight tinge of anger in her voice, but even she wasn't sure why it was there.
そうだね。少し意地汚かった。
Just like being all serious, and then he's like, "Can I have it?" Sojiro plopped himself down on the sofa. His mother must have looked particularly pathetic to Alice since she responded with, "I followed you."
材料はもう残ってないの？
He quickly covered her mouth. Apparently she had surprised even herself. It was quite unusual for her to ask something like that.
残ってないよ。青崎の分も作っちゃったから。
Sojiro stared a bit regretfully at Alice's plate as he responded. Alice could have just let it go. For some reason, she felt the need to speak up again.
青子なら眠っているけど。
いや、もうすぐ起こすから。起きた後で作らされるより一緒に作っておいた方が楽だしね。と、もうすぐ1時か。ちょうどいい。行って起こしてくれよ。
He's gotta feed his muscles, you know?
青子は起こしたら殺すって言ってたけど。
I wasn't sure why Sojiro was willing to take such a risk. Sojiro agreed, but started walking anyway.
でもさ、今起こしておかないと、やっぱり後で殺される運命にあると思うんだ。
His words were surprisingly affectionate. Leaving Alice with only that, Sojiro headed to Alco's room. Alice watched him leave in silence before taking another bite of the stir-fried noodles. Glancing at the door to the hallway to make sure nobody was coming, he took another bite. She repeated that process many times before finishing her food. It was then that she heard Alco's wrath coming from the second floor. Alice stood up and began solemnly clearing the table, feeling a bit sorry for what Sojiro was dealing with. She knew she didn't really have to, but she felt like it was the least she could do for him. She never really expected to feel this way. He cooked for her, and it was surprisingly good, almost enough to make her forget how bad he was at making tea. So he can cook, alright, that's fine. Let's go. Next episode. I like that we're timing this good. It's like 2 hours for an episode. It's pretty good. Well, it was actually 2.5, like 1.5 really. December, the month when even monks were busy at work. Well, it tastes good but look like shit, yeah. It was the culmination of a year. Perhaps due to all the put-off tasks built up through the seasons, the month always seemed to pass by in the blink of an eye. It was a day like any other in December. The 9 now, okay. So technically this was that was episode 8. I can't get the episode numbers right, man. Though none of them were any the wiser to what the others were doing, Alco, Alice, and Sojiro had spent the day attending to their own affairs.
Nani? Kore.
Alco kept the urge to kill out of her voice, but her menacing tone still reverberated into the room. Sunroom was often used to dine in when the weather was nice, since it overlooked the courtyard. It was a room decorated with high-quality furniture and upholstery, befitting a historic Western-style mansion. To be the fusion of Chinese Chippendale aesthetics and traditional English Georgian elegance caused even Alco, a commoner, to think twice about doing anything aristocratic on the grounds. Truthfully, she was sickened by the flagrant waste of money, but none of it was paid for out of her pocket, so she could have cared less what the purchasers spent their money on. 3 unbelievably out-of-place offerings sat atop the lavish sunroom's table, as if enshrined. Stark contrast to the room, they appeared like meals prepared by aliens.
宗十郎、これ、なんか新しい冗談。
More Sojiro cooking, let's go! Alco's trembling fists clenched and unclenched as she questioned the one responsible for today's menu. The clock struck 9 in the evening. Tonight's executive chef nodded dutifully, eager to explain.
これはうちの会社の新製品。
Look at the way he's standing! He's even standing like he's presenting something!
パチモン臭いが、中身は本当にパチモンだ、と木の実が言ってた。
I don't
で
know
も
if that's
俺
on
は本
purpose.
物よりいいと思う。
I don't know if that's on purpose or that's just a CG sprite they had and they used it, but...
そんなことより評価すべきは、社内販売なんで1個40円を切る低価格だ。 すごいぞ。卵をつけても60円とか。
Corner cutting chef seemed pleased with himself. Alco wanted to grumble that the real steal was her appetite.
そう、よかったわね。ところで、今日の夕飯はどこにあるの？
Chef Sojiro thought for a second or two, and clapped his hands together in realization.
青崎、そんなに食べると太るよ。
つまり、これが夕飯だって言い張る気なのね、あんたは！
言い張るも何も、これ以外用意していない。
Two stood there glaring at each other. Alco gave up an air that said she would rather die than eat his food. Sojiro was convinced she would capitulate eventually. They've been using that CG since him standing aside in the drawing room. You know they've been using it, but like the fact they used it here, it's just so on point. Even considered shining her for being a picky eater. I figured it was like a CG they've been using for a while. As usual, the two could not see eye to eye.
いや、私は食べないからね、こんなの。
お姫様みたいなこと言うんじゃない。だいたい今日の夕食代はこれで3名様200円未満なんだぞ。
Sojiro puffed his chest out at his penny-pinching prowess. Alice alternated her gaze between the two quarreling roommates and the strange food before her, which she had also never seen before. She remained a mere bystander in all this.
信じられない。一人60円の食事って、あんた一体いつの生まれよ。このご時世、新しくできた牛丼屋ですら贅沢に原価上げてるわよ、バカ。
青崎、1ヶ月の食費が3万円だけであんな好き勝手な食生活をしていたら、俺が君たちに殺される前に全員が飢え死ぬと思うんだ。確かに昨日のアリスの肉料理は素晴らしかった。グラム700円から肉は種類が変わるんだって感動した。生協の果汁 100% ジュースだってちょっと本気でバカにできるもんじゃないと反省したよ。けどあれが3日続いたらこの家はどうなってしまうんだい？
Sojiro was making perfect sense, for once. Fortunately, neither Alco nor Sojiro noticed the silent stare of disapproval coming from Alice.
その時はその時よ。それにね、昨日みたいなのはめったにないの。アリスはあんたの料理に触発されて柄にもなく頑張ったみたいだけど。
Your meals have inspired Alice to put some effort into hers. With Alco's words, Alice closed her eyes. She might have been trying to quell her anger.
信じられない。じゃあ今までどんな生活してたんだ、青崎たちは。
その時はそれぞれで何とかやってたわ。飢え死に一歩手前ぐらいいい精神修行じゃない。
They're just eating stuff like fucking like oats and shit. The brazen response left him speechless. Story for another time. Sojiro remembered a warning from a certain vice president who had complained about a certain president incessantly bugging him to take her to lunch at the end of the month. That was neither here nor there.
そんな昔のことより今のこと。前に見せたあの腕はどこに行ったのよ、宗十郎。あれを見込んで今日の夕飯を任せたっていうのに。
Thing that seemed to be what ate at Alco the most. The stir-fried yaki udon he had prepared previously had been very well received. It had even melted away Alco's morning grumpiness with just one bite. Sojiro had not seen fit to tell them that it was one of the only dishes in his limited repertoire. For a bachelor, the ability to cook is as close to a superpower as one could get. 15 years into the future, it would likely become a highly desirable trait. Yeah, that's what I thought. It was just bread for dinner, right? Yeah. Okay. I mean, they kind of explained it just now. I guess it's the comparison to what he cooked before. Regardless, that misunderstanding had led Alco and Alice to overestimate Sojiro's culinary talents. Her ire finally made sense to Sojiro.
わかった。自腹を切るから出前を取ろう。作るにしても材料がないからな。その代わり、それは回収する。
Alco basked in her victory. It was then after seeing Sojiro's face as he went to fetch the delivery menu, Alco realized her misreading of him. What annoyed Alco the most was the fact that such a little effort was put into dinner. For Sojiro, this dinner had not been about cutting corners, rather about a meal he had legitimately wanted to try. Alco ruminated on how it could probably pass as food for someone raised in the mountains. Damn it, Max. And then
アリス、何してるの？
Alco noticed Alice standing near the table, holding one of the bowls tightly.
もうそれはいいんだってば。宗十郎に返してきちんとした出前にしましょう。
I'm gonna eat it! Despite Alco's words, Alice stood her ground, firmly clutching the bowl. In fact, she seemed to be embracing it.
これ私のだから
Alice's faint voice drifted across the sunroom. And just like that, the night's menu had been decided by majority rule. Alco's shoulders sank in disappointment at her lot that evening. Come to think of it, Alice was always peculiar about things she deemed hers. It was morning and there were 10 days left in December. The rest of the city was preparing for Christmas festivities. Stojiro headed out to his part-time job. It looked like it could snow at any minute. The tree-lined streets were busy with foot traffic. These days were particularly merry. Students on winter break spent their days hanging out with friends while they counted down the days until the holidays. Colorful Christmas cakes lined storefronts, placed like charms to ward off evil. Huge advertisements adorned the sides of buildings. The station plaza bustled with pop-up stalls. Sojiro stepped out of the milling crowd and into a phone booth. Safe from the winter wind, the inside seemed warmed by comparison. The thought that it would actually be nice to have one in the mountains crossed his mind as he inserted a coin into the phone. He dialed a number from memory, his fingers punching the keys with a somewhat practiced motion. After about 5 seconds, the phone began to ring. 5 seconds, another ring. 10 seconds had passed. He gazed through the window at the various signs on the surrounding buildings, and marveled at the sheer number of people out and about so early. The number he dialed was that of Tobimaru Tsukichi. The Tsukichi name was well known in Misaki as a distinguished landowning family going back generations. Incidentally, their residence was located in the neighboring town of Yashirogi. A kind elderly female voice finally replaced the ringtone. After her polite greeting, she handed the phone to Sojiro's target.
おはよう、飛丸。
はい。おはよ
He was still half asleep, or so it sounded to Sojiro.
一つ相談があるんだけど、いいか？
ああ、陽気に計らえ。
His response did not exactly inspire confidence in Sojiro. He cut right to the chase. There was a long pause. It was hard to read from this end of the receiver.
単純なことで俺を起こすな。いいか、宗十郎。仲が悪けりゃ遊びに行け。機嫌を取りたきゃいいとこ見せろ。で、それが合わなきゃ早めに手を切れ。俺ができるアドバイスはそんなもんだ。
With a piece, Toibaru hung up. It had been 10 in the morning to Sojiro, but after dealing with what seemed like a 6 o'clock Tobimaru, all he could do was nod earnestly. He had a feeling his friend had just been trying to end the call, but deep down he knew that the advice was sound. Incoming date! After the phone ordeal, Sojiro finished up his shopping and returned to the mansion just before noon. He was greeted by the sight of Alco and Alice sitting in the silent gloom. Though he was unsure of the circumstances, from the outside looking in, it seemed like the aftermath of an argument. The silence was as deafening as a blizzard, the biting cold and stinging wind of it. One might also compare the drawing room to an enormous walk-in freezer. It would not have been surprising to look up and see icicles hanging from the ceiling.
やっぱり、今日もか。
Felt like a zookeeper pained to see the raccoon and penguin at each other's throats. In fact, he had seen this literally happen the other day at his zoo janitor job, and now he glanced between them like a zookeeper's trying to gauge the animal's temper. Needless to say, the silence meant they were not fighting at the moment. Dinner served as a respite from the conflict. Sojiro was oblivious to the circumstances surrounding the quarrel, but their day in day out battles against the mysterious mage was clearly taking a toll.
もっともアリスはいつも通りだけど
Across from the quiet and contemplative alcove, Alice was reading an old book on her lap, as she was accustomed to. The book seemed somehow heavier than the other ones.
ただいま煮詰まってるなここんところ
He read them as he took off his coat.
煮詰まるぐらい事態が進んでるならまだ面白みもあるんでしょうけどね。今のご用よ、宗十郎。
ん
Without quite knowing what Alco was getting at, Sojiro quizzically tilted his head. He told himself not to think too hard into it. It only made him more curious.
煮詰まってるってことはもうじき完成ってことでしょ。進展がないって意味合いなら行き詰まってると言うべきね。
Seemingly too preoccupied to scold Sojiro, Alco waved her hand as though shooing off an insect. But Sojiro being Sojiro,
じゃあ言い直していやあれから進展はあったかい
Sojiro held his ground.
宗十郎には関係ないわ。こっちの事情に関しては不可侵だって言わなかった？
Response was calm but pointed. Surliness was her weapon of choice. Today she seemed determined to swing at it at will.
もちろん聞いてるところでお昼はまだだろ
Sojiro chose to brush off Alco's attitude. If Alco's weapon was surliness, Sojiro's was blithness. I don't know what that is. He wielded just enough of it to make Alco flinch.
どうしたの今日は。何かいいことでもあったわけ？
Sojiro shook his head.
まだなんだじゃあちょっと提案がある
Dug around in the pocket of his coat, which was now in a hanger. Alco gave him a dubious stare. Alice's ears perked up at his upbeat tone.
実は今日給料日だったんだお金も入ったことだし外に遊びに行こ
Okay, so the problem was both of them are happy, so he's taking both of them out to dinner. Alright, cool. Dinner or lunch? He spoke with a warm smile as he removed his wallet from his coat pocket. The other two did not know what to make of it.
宗十郎。
He wanted to take exception to his bright mood, but found himself wrestling with the idea of reacting positively to it. After all, he was making a gesture of good faith to try and make things better with what little funds he had. The thought itself was not a bad one. Well, there was always a chance that Alice would keep quiet until the slightest thing annoyed her, at which point she would ruin everything. Oko wanted to accept his goodwill. However, she was not in the mood to walk around town with either of the two, nor was the timing ideal.
悪いけど今忙しいの。暇になったら思い出してあげるからしばらく我慢して。
Alice seemed to give the same response, wordlessly. Sojiro was not about to be held back by the sullen mood.
う忙しいってここで黙り合ってるだけじゃないか徹夜漬けの時気分転換は必要だって言ったのは青崎だろ行き詰まったら回り右して戻らないとどこにも行けない
Sojiro spoke with unusual confidence as he drew 2 tickets from his wallet and slapped them on the table. At first glance, they looked like advance tickets to a movie, but not quite. They were tickets to a famous aquarium. To get there, they would take the rapid train subway to a city several times more modern than Misaki. It housed not only the biggest shopping mall in the prefecture, but also a multi-purpose auditorium set to open next year, designed to host international conferences and stage productions. I see the problem with this though. This means that they'll be leaving their territory, right? They have to leave their territory, right? Yeah.
それと夜はメシアンでカレーでも食べてくれ
Saying that, he slapped 2 bills on the table, as if he had struck it rich. It was Sojiro's turn to make dinner tonight, after all.
じゃあそういうことで
His business concluded, Sojiro returned his wallet to his coat pocket. Yeah, this guy didn't invite himself. He just got it for them. It was then that Alco realized what Sojiro meant by be seeing you.
ちょっと待った。そういうあんたはどうするのよ。
今日はアルバイト
Sojiro was almost too quick with his response, helping Alco to see things for what they really were. For Sojiro's benefit, his gesture was instead an attempt to ease the tension that had built up between Alco and Alice. Fast, both girls would tell you it was an unnecessary gesture. Still, for him to pay this much attention to the household, if anything, gave Alco reason to reflect on her own immaturity. Alco glanced over to the still-seated Alice. At the same time, Alice peeked up at Alco from behind her book. They kept still, staring at each other.
私は構わないけど、今やれることは全部やってあるし。
そうね。そういうことならせっかくだし。
Alco stood up from the sofa, resigned her decision. Sojiro watched on, a satisfied smile on his face. 20 minutes later. As Alco and Alice were done getting ready, Alco called out to Sojiro in the drawing room.
それじゃあ出かけてくるから、あんたもバイト。宗次郎？
Sojiro was crouched in front of the television, unaware that the two had entered the room.
もしかしてビデオいじってるの？
ああ、ちょうどよかった。青崎、これ。
Pausing his audiovisual struggles, Sojiro turned around. They're in casual wear without the jackets, the coats. He froze in shock, forgetting what he was about to say.
私たちお言葉に甘えて出かけてくるけど、どうしたのよ一体。
Sojiro appeared to have gone stiff. Alco stared at him curiously. That's some phrasing. Alice had silently nodded along with his bizarre reaction. She kept her thoughts to herself.
いや、なんかこう。
Still gawking, his voice stuck in his throat. He was blissfully unaware that the shock he was experiencing was a direct result of his emotional state.
それじゃわからないってば。まったく、落ち着いてるくせに妙に挙動不審なんだから。アリスに煙たがられても仕方ないっていうか。
Alice looked on in silence. He was not confused or in a daydream, much you could tell. But this frozen look was, by all accounts, a first for Sojiro.
それで何かあったの？
ああ、いや、これなんだけど、青崎、ビデオってどう使うんだ？
Shaking his head to regain his composure, Sojiro pointed to the VCR. VCR, wow, so old! A VHS player sat on the shelf beneath the TV.
何？タイマー録画でもするの？
Ghost Watch Dragon Ball. Alco walked over and crouched next to Sojiro in front of the TV.
いや、木の実からビデオを借りたんだけど、映らない。
まず、テレビの電源が入ってない。
The click the TV screen flickered alive.
次、チャンネルを外線に合わせて。あら、意外にも真っ黒。木の実くんのことだからテープ頭から録画してると思ったけど。
During this time period, videotapes were still rather expensive. Therefore, it was only natural for people to not want to waste a single second of the tape's 120-minute capacity.
割と趣味には気を使う性格なのね。じゃ、早送りっと。
Alco picked the small remote up and quickly pushed the button forward. Sure, it's a good idea to watch Kinomi's vid here. I had a feeling it was going to be one of those videos too. I had a feeling. But surely it's safe, right? Surely. ECR beeped in protest. Several clicks and thuds. There was an empty whir from within the machine.
壊してないぞ、多分。
The vast majority of people who say this are actually very prone to destroying electrical equipment. That is a separate matter.
おまけに、テープが入ってない。
As soon as the words left her lips, it all made sense.
テープ？
Sojiro imagined adhesive tape, clearly confused.
宗十郎、木の実くんから何か渡されなかった？
渡されたけど、ほら、テーブルの上。
I actually want to put up a sensor just in case. It can't be that bad, right? It can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. Surely, it can't be that bad. Wait, I don't have a sensor. Fuck it. Let me see. I do have an existing one. just in case. Just in case. Though she should have been used to it by now, she caught herself wondering if Soja was being stupid deliberately. It's not 18 plus game. I know it shouldn't be 18 plus game. It should be okay. I'm just putting it there just in case. I don't know.
木の実くんがなんて言ったか覚えてる？
テープ貸してやるから、家に帰ったらビデオを見ろ、と。
一番大事な言葉が抜けてたわけね。はあ、失望を通り越して怖くなるわ。あっさり順応しているように見えてこれだものね。どんなケツのあたりな毎日送ってんのよあんたは。
Exasperated, Aoko fetched the tape in question. It was labeled Gaku Gaku Animal Kingdom African Adventure. It's an animal video. Okay, yeah. The Aoko this knocked Polske economy down a level on the ratings. She kept with the student council. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were
このテー
joking,
プをデッ
Ethan.
キに入れて再生すればいいの。爪は折ってないから録画ボタンだけは押さないようにね。
爪とは？
ここテープの側面にへこみがあるでしょ。これをカバーしているのが爪。
Doki Animal Kingdom. Bruh.
これを切り取っておくともうそのテープは上書き録画できなくなるのよ。そうね。例えるなら授業のノート。大事なものだから消しゴムで消えないようにフィキサチーフをかけたっていうか、ヒューマンエラーを物理的に防止するアナログな防御法ってわけ。
He inserted the tape into the VCR and the remote to Sojo. So you... Okay. Just a small interaction used up a fair bit of Aoko's patience. Completely ignorant of Aoko's feelings, Sojo gleefully pressed the play button.
はあ、前から危なっかしいと思ってたけど、まさかここまでとはね。時代錯誤にも程がある。あんた、山で何やってたの？空手家じゃあるまいし、熊を倒す修行でもしてたとか言わないでしょうね。
Sojo managed to pick up on Aoko's rude tone, and he frowned disapprovingly.
それは、もしかして俺をバカにしてるのか？
心外ね。事実バカにしてるんだけど。
Aoko answered unapologetically. On the TV, a crocodile's yawning mouth appeared.
そんなバカな話があるもんか。なんで熊を倒すために修行しなくちゃいけないんだ。
Sojo turned towards the TV in a huff. I'm going in his blind as well. Perhaps because of his rare outbursts, as he turned face to face with the gaping maw of a crocodile on the TV, fell backwards in surprise. Aoko unpursed her lips upon seeing this, delighted. So leaving to see the boy disarmed.
けど青崎、この機械ずいぶん埃が積もっているけど、掃除はしていないのか？
私はあんまり使わないし、アリスは見ないから今までほっぽってただけよ。ダメ元でトレーニング用に買ってもらったんだけど、飽きちゃった。イメージでどうにかできる問題じゃなかったっていうか。
That's how exercises work, damn it! Aoko shrugged at her past superficiality. And Sojo was led to believe yet another falsehood about modern life that VCRs would go out of fashion.
それじゃあ留守番お願いね。バイト、本当はないんでしょ
Aoko walked out of the drawing room, smiling. Her grin was the cheap shot that left Sojiro speechless. As he scratched his cheek, he was reminded that she was not someone to be trifled with. After watching the end of the drama between her housemates, Alice made for the reception area as well. Left alone in the room, Sojiro took his seat on the sofa. Certainly not easy making everything run smoothly around these parts. Until they came back, he could enjoy his crocodile watching in peace. Actual crocodile watching. For a blind guess, they took the subway from Misaki for 6 stations. Yeah, I have a feeling, because they're heading out of Misaki, something's gonna happen with Sojiro still in the mansion. And then he's gonna get caught up in it again. That just makes sense, narrative-wise. From there, they rode another 3 steps by express train. After about an hour, Aoko and Alice arrived at the Arisaka station. Misaki City was a mixture of old and new architecture. Arisaka was a brand new town built in accordance with recent government ordinance. It was as though an entire town full of tall buildings sprouted up in the middle of nowhere. It was near the end of December, in the middle of the winter break. Even the bustling plaza in Misaki was quiet compared to Arisaka in the evening. Whether it was a huge mall full of countless specialty stores, or the crowded multi-purpose auditorium, it really was something for everyone here. For that reason, beyond its local residents, Arisaka Station was crowded with people from far and wide.
へえ、あれが新しい演劇ホールか。県内最大のコンサートホールらしいけど、中はどうなってんだろう。なんか周りのビルより背が高くない？
I didn't know Alice had a hat like this. Made their way to the aquarium, weaving through the crowds. Aoko might have been used to city life. Alice was silently anxious. Maybe Kinomi is smart, bro, and the VHS is a bit of animal video, but if you keep watching it, you get the goods. True. People passing by must have thought this pale girl out of place, which Alice happened to agree with.
来年夏にはビッグアーティストも来日予定。ってピンクトゥルーデが入ってない？ちょっとこれ日本初ライブよ、アリス。
I just saw the ticket prices before. I was looking at it as like 700 yen. 700 yen for a ticket to an aquarium? Holy shit, that is so cheap compared to what it is these days. Like in 1980s prices, man. Alco exclaimed, overcome by excitement. Again, inflation and wages, so it probably would have been more equivalent to like 15 bucks or something, I don't know. This kind of pop rock band was right up Alco's alley, but naturally Alice did not seem very interested.
それよりセレモニーに予定されてるポーランド楽団の方が驚きだと思うけど、随分とお金がかかっているようね。これが人。
Alco cursed under her breath before hurrying them along. Underneath the construction map read, with the support of the Kuonji group. The aquarium they were looking for was on the top floor of a massive building. Maybe it was because there was no longer a new attraction. Japan was peak Japan, now they are unable to recover. Yeah, I remember Kiryu beating money out of people, earning millions. Yeah, remember that. Perhaps it was because the first floor cinema drew the crowds. With only a few people scattered around the entrance, the atmosphere inside was very calm. It wasn't quiet, but desolate, and far removed from the hustle and bustle outside. Perhaps they were going for a museum-like mood. Alice quietly caught her breath, staring in awe. She was like a child seeing the circus for the first time, her eyes wide in anticipation and wonder.
気に入ったみたいね。よかったよかった。宗十郎おすすめの物件は気難しいアリスさんのお眼鏡にかないましたか。
Ko found herself smiling as well. So look, 700 yen. There was a certain joy in seeing Alice's wonderment.
別に 屋上にある水族館が珍しいだけ。
According to the guide on the wall, the entrance to the aquarium was nearly as big as the Kuonji Mansion's foyer. The outdoor penguin show was apparently suspended due to the star penguin Flippy undergoing treatment for an injury. It was an unfortunate state of affairs, one that did not stop Alice from continuing to read over the guide. Apparently she was quite familiar with penguin shows. Then... Can't believe it. Alice quietly whimpered, as if holding back a scream.
何々、どうしたの？
Alcor said, still looking at the floor plan. It was rare to see Alice getting this emotional outside of the mansion. For some reason, she was trembling. Nothing seemed terribly off about the aquarium's offerings.
ゾウガメがいない。
Giant tortoises!
え？
700 yen for high school prices. No, adult prices. True.
話が違うわ、青子。どうしてゾウガメの展示スペースがないの？
どうしてって、そりゃゾウガメぐらいになったらもうほとんど陸上生物だからじゃない？大きいし。
なんで？ペンギンはいるのに不公平よ。イルカだって許せないわ。
It's a bitter pill for Alice to swallow. The idea that they did not have a giant tortoise, despite having a dolphin, left Alice's eyes hot with indignation.
あー、言われてみれば確かに。ペンギンとイルカは定番なのになぜゾウガメだけ外されるのか。ちょっとした日常の落とし穴ね。
Said, something like a giant tortoise would be boring and unpopular. She was sensible enough to read the room, however, and kept her thought to herself.
アリス、こっち。チケットはあるからそっちに並ぶことはないわよ。
A few moments after the giant tortoise fiasco, presenting the tickets they received from Sojuro, they headed towards the once popular entrance. From the entrance gate, the corridor stretched into a dark hallway completely illuminated in blue. Figures and faces became mere silhouettes in the darkness. There was no darkness born from magecraft, but a man-made area of twilight. A little bit of shadow and blue, the only light being from the illuminated tanks. The two witches continued walking down the artificial ocean corridor. The tanks seemed like windows into hundreds of different worlds. Each had their own separate temperature and environment. It was as if they were snapshots of the same place at different times. Mesmerized by the refracting images of the ocean floor, the housemates' conversation grew sparse.
そういえば、アリスの家ってあれだけ大きいのにプールとかないわよね。なんで？
呆れた。水槽を見て何を想像したのかは聞かないけど、必要ないものを欲しがるのはあなたの悪い癖ね、青子。必要ないってことはないんじゃない？水遊びはこっちよりそっちの方が馴染み深いでしょうに。
I actually agree with Alice on this one. Pools are fucking hard to maintain, man.
あ、もしかしてアリス、泳げない？
泳ぎの経験ぐらいあるわ。夏は湖で何度も遊んだもの。私、大型のセントバーナードにだって負けなかったのよ。
セントバーナードって、アリスさんたらもしかして息継ぎとか苦手かしら？
この世で最も聞きたくない言葉の一つね。クロールとかバタフライとか、発明した人は半魚人になればいいのに。
Black. Pace was more delicate and solemn than a stroll along the beach. It's a sort of absent-minded chat you might hear from between the girls anywhere in the world. Here, the only thing to do was to look at the blue screens.
でも驚いた。あんなにあっさり館の留守を任せるなんて。あいつがこっそり西館に入るかもとか考えなかった？
彼、そこまで考えなしじゃないでしょ。それならそれで手間が省けてせいせいした？そうじゃなくて、一度交わした約束は破らないんじゃないかって。
That he was not. Alco nodded, her long hair waving back and forth. A certain gleam of surprise in her eyes. They meandered to the next aquatic world. Clack, clack, clack.
ところで水族館は初めて？
これで2度目。昔友達と2人で行ったきりよ。
嘘、本
本当6年以上も前、まだイギリスにいた頃。
当？そうじゃなくて友達の方。あんた友人はいないって言ったじゃない。
昔の話よ。私たち同じ名前だったの。それが縁でよく遊んでいたけれど、長続きはしなかったわ。
そっか、あっちじゃそう珍しくない名前なのね、アリスって。こっちで言うところの涼子とか花子みたいなもの？
ええ、青子とか赤子とか黒子とか白子みたいなものよ。
後半はみんな普通名詞なんですけど。
To each their own, a society of names. Swirling of the waters was dizzying, much like the hectic world of humans. Their hands swung back and forth as they walked towards the next world.
そういう青子は彼をどうするつもりなの？
どうって、今の一件を終わらせるまでおとなしくしてもらって、落ち着いたら忘却のルーン探してなかったことにするだけでしょ？これ以上迷惑かけられないわよ。
それは私に？
え？あ、うん、そうに決まってるじゃない。ところでこの魚綺麗よね。なんか泳ぎたくなってくる。アリス、来年の夏は海にでも行ってみよっか。
海ってあの海？
もちろん。夏の海って言ったら灼熱の太陽と砂浜、水平線に沈む夕日ってね。今年は行けなかったけど、来年は一緒に行かない？
呆れた。本当、あなたって楽観的。でもそうね、夏まで生きていられたのならそういうこともあるかもしれない。
Soldier X Alco? Nope. Soldier X Alice? Nope. Come on, aboard! SS Alco X Alice! That's right. They are Nakayoshi. That's it. Clack, clack, clack. The two girls journeyed to the next oceanic wonderland, virtually taking in the sights. The visitors to these winter waters had begun to leave, satisfied by their tour. The sound of their footsteps heralded their farewell. Well, that's nice. An hour into the wayfaring sea voyage, themselves in the maze-like corridors of seemingly endless exhibits, they somehow found themselves on the next floor. Alco had heard that the aquarium was situated on the top floor, and was shocked to find out that there was yet another above it. It was likely by design that the actual top floor could only be accessed from within the aquarium. But it's moments of intrigue such as this what attractions are made for.
アリス？
Turning this way and that, she found Alice had disappeared. Her housemate had just been there, however, and Alco took to looking for her. She soon found her nearby. Her white overcoat shone brightly in front of the dimly lit exhibition. She was staring motionless into the water tank. There's a bunch of typos. But there's also a bunch of me reading, like, extra and saying extra or reading it wrong, so... Alice almost looked to be staring through it, as though distracted by something.
どうしたのアリス？気分でも悪くなった？
He spoke, hoping to snap her out of it. Alice's typically cold aura seemed to have all but left her.
珍しい魚でもいた？それ、余り物を端に追いやりましたって感じの水槽だけど。
Alice gave a non-committal response. Just ahead of her gaze was a single shadow.
わお、マンボウ。
Alice remained motionless, unresponsive to Alco's sarcasm. She stood in silence, watching the poor little fish, drifting listlessly in the tank where they put the fish that did not fit anywhere else, here at the end of the hall. To put it lightly, sunfish were not especially pleasant to look at. But looking at one, it begged the question of what direction evolution wanted to take with it. It looked like it swam using rudder-like fins on its top and bottom. It lacked the grace of other fish. To Aoko, its eyes, body, and strange movements made it an awkward creature.
ねえアリス、あっちの水槽見ない？ジンベエザメの回遊とか見目麗しいわよ。
Just unmoved, fixated on the sunfish. Clumsily drifted around its tank, occasionally bumping into the glass as it turned.
青子、この子泳ぐのが下手だわ。
Alice extended her finger towards the glass. They retracted it, feeling childish.
いっか。愛嬌だけはあるしね、マンボ。
Did not seem like Alice was going to budge. Alright. No worries, Epun. I'll see you later. So there is a raid in Final Chapter. How long is the raid there for? I mean, I'm probably not going to do the raid anyway, honestly. I'll just like do like one session, whatever. Designing herself, Aoko stayed with Alice while she stared at the cushion-shaped fish.
へえ、マンボウってフグ目だったんだ。何々？マンボウのメスは一度に3億個の卵を海中に放出する地上で最も多くの卵を産む脊椎動物である。なるほどね。他の魚たちにとっちゃ格好の餌になるから多く産むこと、それ自体が生存のための手段になるわけか。
Aoko seemed taken in by the biological details of the fish. Alice couldn't have cared less. She was lost in the ebb and flow of emotions between wonder and woe, with every clumsy bump of the fish into the glass. She softly spoke.
さっきの話だけど。
え？さっきの話って何？
彼について留守を任せるとか。
It seemed like Alice had returned to her normal self. There was that cold aura. Whether inside the mansion or out, that stubborn chill that pushed people away was back.
私の気が変わったわけじゃないわ。依然として彼のことはわからないもの。わからない人をどうやって信頼すればいいの？
まあね。でもじゃあどうして？
青子のことはわかるわ。あなたはいつも正しい選択をする。だから青子を信じる彼の人間性は信じてもいい。
It's true. You did not know Sojiro, had any intention to. Because of her trust in Aoko, she could trust in Aoko's decision to allow him to stay. Oh look, it's the Aoko x Alice! Seemed Alice was challenging her own feelings. She said she could not trust someone she did not know. In other words, she wished to trust him, and in order to do so, she needed to know more about him.
口にするのはなんだから突っ込まないけどね。それより何？そんなに私のこと信頼してくれてたの？アリス？
ええ。行為はともかく信頼だけはしているわ。だって共犯者でしょ。私たち。
White coat swayed to and fro. Just like that, a short excursion had come to an end. Straight ahead was the exit back to the real world. A step away from the exhibit was a step towards becoming better roommates.
優しい顔をしているのに傷だらけね。
More whisper. With that, she bid farewell to the lonely figure in the tank. Well, nothing happened. Okay. The sun set early during winter. By 4 in the afternoon, he had already fallen below the horizon. Evening seemed to arrive at the mansion, then in the city.
なるほど。君の生態はよくわかった。
Sojiro sat alone, sipping his warm tea in the chilly room. He relaxed on the couch, staring out the window, having had his fill of crocodiles. As he sprawled out on the sofa, his body refused to move. Maybe he had always wanted to try it. After 3 straight hours of crocodile watching, he intently pondered what it would be like to laze there for the remainder of the day like a reptile. Just as he was considering the opportunity to nap, until Aoko and Alice returned. An unnatural noise echoed throughout the halls of the mansion. Here we go, okay. Sluggishly, he rose from all fours to a bipedal state, as if undergoing an evolution of his own. There was a knocking sound that repeated itself regularly, with patient pauses in between. He recognized the cadence from something he had experienced at his apartment before.
新聞の勧誘か
Leaving for the foyer, Sojiro was impressed that they had hiked all the way up to the hill. Knocking resounded eerily. Without a doorbell of any kind, visitors had no choice but to rap on the door using whatever they had in hand. It would take a literal iron fist to produce the din Sojiro heard now. From his position in the hall, the front door looked like an ornately built fortification. The sturdy double doors looked as though they could withstand any onslaught of blows. But now they rattled in protest to the repeated knocking. Whoever the visitor was, they seemed determined to breach the castle gate by force if its defender refused to sally forth. Fortunately for them, Sojiro was sympathetic, having experienced selling newspapers himself.
はい今開けます
This is bad. Already feeling something's going on. I'll see you later, Festian. Thanks for coming by. He knew what it was like to be in those shoes, so was unsurprised by their persistence. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Hang on. She's the person that we saw last time, right? At the pachinko. There stood the second surprise of the day. Sojiro was struck speechless. He was greeted by a young woman who hardly looked the part of a newspaper hawker. Standing in the courtyard against a dust-lit horizon, she appeared more at home in the European mansion than Sojiro did. That's a lot of buttons. She carried a dignified air, in spite of her dainty frame. A tad shorter than Sojiro, she was tall for her sex. Green clothing was subtly colored, yet flashy, clearly inspired by foreign fashion. She seemed prim and proper, yet bold. Though vaguely garish, her appearance spoke of strength and confidence. Sojiro knew all too well that such a woman was not to be trifled with. The stranger appeared more friendly than intimidating. Perhaps it was her short hair that made her look approachable. Light and brown, it stopped just above the nape of her neck. Sojiro silently thought that it was a shame that she hadn't grown it out. She looked at him and offered a smile. Despite seeming visibly older than him, this made her appear impish and cute. Sojiro reacted with suspicion, better than by now than to fall for a chopping smile. At any rate, it was rude to stare.
どちら様でしょうか
He tried not to look flustered as he greeted the visitor. To which she replied,
こんばんは。青子います？
He smiled as she used Aoko's first name with a familiar tone.
青崎はいないんです
He smiled again, this time deviously upon learning of Aoko's absence.
それじゃあ、クオンジさんも留守なんだ。
Sojiro looked perplexed. This was the first time he had heard Alice referred to by her last name only, again, with the familiarity of an old friend.
そっか。夜ならともかく、日中から二人で出かけるとは感心感心。形だけの雑居だろうと思ったけど、ちゃんとうまくいってるのね。
Sojiro found himself nodding in response to her smile. It was strange enough that the visitor knew both Aoko and Alice. But Sojiro found her odd as well. Likely in her early 20s, he did not appear much older than he was. She was clearly hiding something behind her nonchalant manner and bright smile.
それじゃあ帰ってくるにしても夜？
はい、終電前には帰ってくると思いますけど。
そう。ところで君誰？
Sojiro, troubled by her forwardness, wanted to ask her the same. Alas, who are you was a question far too difficult for Sojiro.
すみません。誰かと言われてもよくわからなくて。とりあえず今は留守番してますけど、実は青崎の友人なんです。
As a response without an ounce of persuasion to it, the young woman's face lit up at what she believed was the boy's attempt to tease her.
へえ、面白いこと言うのね、君。名前はなんて言うの？
静木宗十郎というのですが。
His shy answer made her giggle. Sojiro had no idea what he had said that was so funny. Her laugh did not offend him. It came across as warm and affable, rather than derogatory. After she finished giggling, fixed him with a rather tender look.
いや、気に入ったわ。宗十郎くんだっけ？君には合わない名前だけど、それも暗示的で素敵だし。じゃあ、そういうわけで、お茶でも入れてくれない？
いや。
Flipped past him into the house, boldly striding through the entrance hall.
うわ、呆れた。ほんと以前のまんまじゃない。せっかくこっちに持ってきたんだから、悪いところはリフォームしたものと思ったけど、何も柱の歪みまで再現しなくてもいいのにね。
Visitor cheerfully inspected the foyer. Sojiro still stood at the entrance. The clicking of her heels on the wooden floor echoed as she moved toward the drawing room.
どうしたの？こっちでしょ？今は。
He disappeared from the foyer into the drawing room, oddly familiar with the layout of the house.
青崎かアリス、どっちかの先輩かな。
Sojiro muttered to himself, walking to the drawing room. He entered to see the woman walking around the room gleefully. Like someone strolling down a park boulevard. She peered around, breathing in the nostalgia, swirling with ladylike, girlish glee.
よく見れば、このテレビって。
She stared at the television inquisitively. Perhaps she had never seen a 30-inch television before. Awkwardly for Sojiro, the cathode ray tube was still displaying images of the animal kingdom. I wish she had stopped the video before it answered the door.
もし。
He blurted half a question, attempting to regain his composure. There were many questions to be answered, but he first resolved to ask her name at least. The woman turned a coldly observant gaze to him. Her intimidating eyes and long, thin eyebrows bored into Sojiro through her spectacles. Sojiro had intended no offense, but now he felt like he had chosen his words very poorly. He apologetically clammed up. Then,
やだな、宗十郎くん。もし、なんてかしこまって。私、そんなおばさんに見える？
he snickered. A disapproving glare melted into a teasing smile. Of course, that wasn't true at all. It would be more accurate to say she had the air of an older sister. Or at least that's what Sojiro attempted to express with body language, to which she grinned smugly.
よろしい。なら、そんな他人行儀な話し方はやめましょう。つまらないし、柄じゃないわ。
Without making a sound, she took an effortless seat on the sofa. Exactly as if she belonged there. There's even magic colors! Her posture and movements exuded sophistication. But she required no words to instruct him to hurry along the tea. Without pressing her further, Sojiro headed to the kitchen. It seemed that the conversation would not proceed until tea had been served. He chose the falchion he was forced to replace once before, after using it without permission. Since she was here to see Alko, he decided to serve her using Alko-Severa's teacup. Into the cup as blue as the ocean depths, he carefully poured the tea before returning to the drawing room. Gently, he placed the teacup on the table and faced the woman.
尋ねるのが遅れましたけど、青崎の知り合いかな。
Despite being told otherwise, Soldier could not help but stand on ceremony. His clumsy effort to make the question sound casual only jumbled it further. The visitor's eyes narrowed again in displeasure.
その青崎っていうのをやめてくれない？なんだかくすぐったくて。青子でいいでしょ、呼び方は。
The woman kept the rest of her expression indifferent as she slowly raised the cup to take a sip. Smiling, she tolerated the tea that Aoko and Alice regularly criticized as bitter and clumsily brewed. Soldier had yet to learn that society thoughtfully awarded participation trophies to people merely for trying, regardless of the outcome.
ほら、立ってないで座って。見下ろされるのは好きじゃないんだ。
Soldier tilted his head, noting a slight familiarity to her manner of speech. It was almost as if they'd met somewhere before.
あれ？
The sight of her sitting on the sofa began to stir forgotten memories. Noticing his reaction, the woman became visibly delighted.
思い出した？私もちょっと驚いたわ。青子を訪ねに来たらいつか見た君が出迎えてくるんだから。
As she was chuckling, Soldier remembered everything. He had only glimpsed her for a moment. There was no mistaking it. It had to be her. Smoking the long cigarette, who had cleaned out the pachinko parlor.
あの時は私もショックだったな。宗十郎くん、目が合うなりいきなり逃げ出したでしょ。そんなに私ってこわもてなのかしらって、あの日の晩は真剣に悩んだんだから。
In spite of her words, she clearly enjoyed the memory. She was right. Mistaken her for the murderous shadow, Alco, in the park from the previous night, and fled in mortal terror. Yeah, that's right, they weren't the same person. Yeah, that's right. Even though it was clearly a case of mistaken identity, you could now see why he had mixed them up.
そうか。雰囲気が似てるんだ。
Finally, Soldier realized who the visitor was. He chided himself for not realizing it sooner.
それじゃあ、あなたは。
Just as he was about to say it, she held up her hand to interrupt him. She pointed at him like she was aiming a gun.
ごめんなさい。君の仕草がちょっと可愛くてからかいが過ぎちゃった。自己紹介が遅れたけど、私は青崎東子。率直に言うと、青子の実の姉ってわけね。
Thought so. Okay. Figured. No wonder he'd been charmed at first sight. It wasn't hard to envision Toko as a not-too-distant future version of Alco, with a smile that imparted courage to any who glimpsed it. While Alco was earnest and diligent, Toko seemed to be shrewd and playful.
あの子が困ってるって聞いてね。いい加減忠告してあげる気で、はるばるやってきたわけなのでした。
Toko's sister chuckled coyly while sipping on her tea. By her charm, Soldier sat on the sofa as well. Felt like he could relax a little now that the initial shock of an unexpected guest had subsided. Just like that, it was almost 5 in the afternoon. Alco and Alice would be returning from their excursion soon. I really want to see them meet up, see their reaction. This was Misaki City's only subway line. Only half a year had passed since its opening, and at the end of the fairly new platform, the two girls stood. The time was 6:30 in the evening. They had been idling for around 20 minutes since returning from Arisaka, and had yet to return to street level.
青子。
There was a hint of irritation in Alice's voice.
ちょっと待って。あともう一回だけ。ね。
Alco begged Alice, hands together, trembling from the cold. It was rare to see her act this childish. No doubt Tobimaru would consider this behavior more strange than cute if he were here. From the end of the platform, Alco appeared into the creeping darkness to where the tracks led.
あなたの趣味変わってるわ。
Alice muttered, sitting on the bench with forbearance. Any other day she would have been fine heading back by herself, but today she was in a good mood and decided to humor Alco. Knowing full well that her rare spells of positivity were about as fragile as freshly fallen snow, she hoped to go home while she was still in high spirits. Eyes closed, her placid demeanor conveyed her feelings well enough. Thus, the two of them waited on the platform alone, for a subway train they had no intention of riding. The subway had recently opened for service. The people of Misaki were humble folk, and for now, few passengers were drawn to the novelty and high prices of the new train. Thanks to the low foot traffic, the platform was still as good as new. There was something primeval about a subway devoid of people. It was a picture of tranquility, free of human interference, not just silent, lifeless. This was a realm unmolested by living creatures, where only speechless organisms dwelt. The harshly artificial fluorescent lighting underscored its soullessness. It was a cave where light ended and shadows began, where riderless vessels disappeared into the dark. The platform was wedged between the two tracks, like a jetty built upon a subterranean sea. In this place, far removed from the world above, Alcor waited with eyes closed for the familiar rumble. It was she who had proposed that they delay their return and rest at the platform. The reason was simple. Alcor Alzaki enjoyed the soothing sound of passing subway trains.
今年はもうライブハウスに行けそうもないし、これぐらいのわがままはいいでしょ?
He had said to Alice, her eyes still closed. Had neither nodded nor objected, so they'd watched 3 trains come and go. Silence fell again. So she's a train enthusiast. Alcor waited for the next train with anticipation. Alice sat and stared at the tunnel more patiently. According to the display board, the next train was due to arrive in 5 minutes. From the dark tunnel came wind and rumbling. A purposefully placed bounded field now surrounded the platform. They're in for a fight! There was no sign of any station personnel. Entrances and exits were few and narrow. The lack of bystanders made the field harsh, hardly necessary. Suddenly, 6 figures appeared in front of the stairs to the surface. They all shared the same face. Motionless and with smiles like a crescent moon, they stared at Alcor and Alice.
鈍っているにも程があるわね。
Alice let out a quiet, dejected sigh.
どうかしたアリス?
どうも何も。この駅で降りたのはあなたと私だけなの。気づいていた。
そりゃね。相変わらずここの地下鉄ってば利用客が少ないって。
Alcor trailed off, cutting in annoyance.
で、そういうアリスはいつ気がついたの?
憂鬱なことにたった今よ。青子ばかり責められないわね。あなたと私が一つならこんなこともなかったのに。
つまらない例え話は口にしない。
They traded stoic and calm words, never moving or making eye contact. In contrast, the figures near the stairs began to stir. As though regressing from primates to wild beasts, they dropped prone in unison and scrambled forth like man-sized ants. Advanced as a stream, one after another. Soon, the clattering came from not just from the platform entrances, from the subway tunnel as well. Oh, fuck, it's a storm of puppets! At a glance, they numbered at least 30 strong. The eerie skittering multiplied, echoing off the subway walls.
信じられない。これだけの自動人形集めたらうちどころかフランスの一等地も買えるんじゃない？
ええ。もっともこんな出来じゃ買い手は見つからないでしょうけど。
なんだ、ガラクタはガラクタか。
The horde leapt forward in response to Alcor's insult. It was a sudden charge, like a hurtling dump truck. Alice remained still. As though expecting the attack, Alcor swung her right arm in an arc. The blue missile of light was easily repelled. Her magic bullet, Snap, had little to no effect on the puppets. They scrambled over each other like frogs, heads jerking and twisting in search of prey.
全部で30か。悪いけど一人でやらせてもらうわよ、アリス。この前の実力と思われたままじゃ不愉快だ。
She spoke to Alice, who was still sitting on a bench. Alco stepped towards the edge of the platform. Among the myriad regrets she still had from the amusement park, the House of Mirrors stung the most. She had been caught off guard in her last battle against that puppet. Today she'd come prepared, and she had Alice as backup. Alco ignited her magic crest. This time she would restore her honor and...
私の後ろまで下がって青子。そこにいたらあなたまで食べてしまう。
All it took was to stop Alco was one raised finger. In the depths of the ocean black, the bells of night chimed out. The jetty, as if embraced by a sea god like Poseidon, Waratsumi, became awash with white motes, which seemed to engulf everything.
青子のやり方じゃ後が残るでしょう。もうじき次の電車も来るし。
Behind the white veil, form blurred and stretched upward. It was like a melancholy ballerina. Be melancholic? The figures surrounding the prima ballerina bristled in response to the strange aura. Though puppets were inhuman mystical vessels, they had far more reason to fear Alice than they did the human Alco. Began to flee. Whoever their master was, they sensed enough danger to order a retreat. However, it was too late. The dancers were captivated by their prima, transfixed in place, as if their Achilles tendons had been severed.
それに気分を台無しにされたのはあなただけじゃないわ。
He removed her black glove. Unlike her subdued demeanor at the mansion, Alice's aura away from home was a biting, frigid blizzard that none could approach. Her discarded gloves floated down, settling on the platform deck. Pale haze grew even thicker. Terrified, the mass of shadows cried out for mercy.
さあ、ごっこ遊びをしましょう。
In the nebulous mist, a dark fairy tale came to life. Inside that fog, the macabre melody of her voice felt real. Feast, grind, crunch. At last, the final puppet fell. On the walls, on the floor, on the ceiling. The grotesque mechanical sounds of their demise filled the air. Twisted shrieks plastered the subway surfaces, like indelible bloodstains. Some amorphous abomination had, hastily, just slowly enough to savor the taste, chewed and devoured all 30 puppets. Only a lone severed arm remained on the platform.
持ってきてたのあれ。
Chris spoke sideways to Alice, making no attempt to hide her disgust. The brutal gluttony they'd just witnessed had a name. It was the Beast of the Fog, one of her 3 great ploys, kickshaw. The Meister's Rosehound, Snatch. Alco's words stung, since Alice was the one harboring its true form. The great 3 ploys wielded terrifyingly powerful curses. Wonder Snatch had its uses in combat. Alco was not at all amused to learn that her companion had been carrying it around town all day. Without hyperbole, it was akin to going out for dinner with a bunker buster bomb in one's pocket.
まあ、次からは一言お願いね。他のプロイならいいけど、今のやつだけは別よ。できれば洋館限定にしてほしいぐらい。
悪かったわ。でも、最近何も食べさせてなかったから。
Alice walked slowly towards the severed arm. Indeed, all she'd done was feed her ploy. No one had died, and no blood had been shed, since the meal was made of plastic.
青子、ちょっと。
Alice picked up the arm and beckoned Alco over.
これを見て。私たちは今まで相手を人形使いと思っていたけど、正確には違ったみたい。 わかる？この人形たちは新しすぎる。この子たちが作られたのは17世紀以後よ。それはそれで信じがたいことだけど。
なんですって？
Though it sounded counterintuitive, automata typically performed better with age. Since the 17th century, the magical concept of using puppets and mannequins had declined. Consequently, it became much harder to produce combat-effective automata. If one wanted to build an automaton these days, it was far more cost-effective to train even a low-class familiar. It'd be better to construct it too. Therefore, it was common for modern puppet masters to collect parts made before the 17th century and use them in their creations. The high price of automata often came not from their antiquated combat abilities, from the rarity of the parts used to make them. Despite that, the enemy mage controlling these puppets used them as fodder, as if they grew in trees. The only conclusion to be drawn was that the current opponent was a spoiled upstart with wealth, no territory. So Alice and Alco imagined, anyway.
それともう一つ。この構造は三崎氏の結界に似ているわ。まるで自分たちこそがこの町を守る兵士だって主張するぐらい。
What if they're Tokos? Alice presented the evidence to Alco, still waving fog out of her face. Revelation stirred profound surprise, and then rapid realization.
そういうことなのね。
Alco growled, violently smashing the arm on the ground. Her face twisted with anger and a hint of fear.
惜しげもなく骨董品を出してくると思ったら、そもそも出し惜しむほどのものじゃなかったわけか。確かにあの女なら町の結界にも反応しないし、私の欠点も知ってて当然。視点の退去だって簡単にやってのけるわよね。だって。
Quietly listened to Alco's furious rambling. Mused.
青子、これを作ったのはそうなの？
ええ、昔から物を作ることに関しちゃずば抜けていたからね。
Well, let me finish that.
ええ、昔から物を作ることに関しちゃずば抜けていたからね、あの人は。
Alright, didn't say who. Alco glared at the severed arm. She was furious at its creator, and herself for taking so long to figure it out.
でも、ようやく合点がいった。認めたくないけど、今回の敵は間違いなく私の姉貴。
See?
この土地の元継承者、青崎東子その人よ、アリス。
The desolate subway platform returned to silence. Alco's words lingering uncomfortably in the air. And she's speaking with Sojuro right now. Its most terrifying animals end. A short time ago at the Kuanji estate. The videotape finished playing. The VCR had automatically stopped playback, foregoing the need to hit the stop button to avoid the static storm. What remained on screen was a reflection of Sojuro and Toko, Aokazaki, sitting opposite each other in conversation.
秘密を知られたから先生なしの直接攻撃ね。怪獣作を考えもしないのは青子らしいけど。
It's hard to tell if she was being patronized or different. Toko Aozaki took a sip from her cup as she listened to Sojiro's story. She would have savored the anecdote about the amusement park kerfuffle, not for the poor excuse for a cup of tea in her hand. Wait, so he told her about the secret? I mean, sure, she's a mage, but yeah, okay. Or he only mentioned that he was attacked because he found out her secret.
ありがとう。参考になったわ。ここしばらく青子とは顔を合わせていなかったから、あの子がどんな風に成長したかなんて想像するしかなかったし。それと、一応肉親として謝っておかないとね。
災難に付き合わせて悪かったわ、宗十郎くん。ほんと、あの子ったら昔から迷いってものがなかったから。
なさすぎると思います。
Sojiro was enjoying the conversation, despite having to relive those events. About an hour passed while the two of them sat in conversation, each short on topics to discuss. Alcohol was an easy topic for both of them, so the conversation centered mostly around her.
ところで、さっきから気になってることがあるんだけど、聞いていいかな？
While she kept her posture dignified, Toko's eyes shone with eager curiosity. The elegance caused Sojiro's heart to beat a little faster.
気になってることですか？
Despite his caution, he found himself speaking politely. She smiled affectionately, as if she found him pleasing.
ええ。一度目はダッシュで逃げられて驚いたけど、今日は違った意味で驚かされた。ね、そういうのが若い子たちの流行りなの？
The cola, right?
はい。
Oh, okay, I see it. Right, there's the thing. It's like a leather collar. I see it now. Okay. I thought that was just his bandages, but okay. Toko tilted her head, her eyes fixated on the collar that Aoko had snugly secured around his neck.
新手のチョーカー？でもどこから見ても、ほら。
The spectacled woman made a show of holding her tongue. On a completely unrelated note, in another decade, similar accessories will become a standard part of any visual kei artist's wardrobe.
まさか、どこから見ても首輪ですよ、犬用の。
やっぱり？けど、その首はすごく可愛いわ。よく似合ってるけど、自分でつけたの？
Toko stared intently, examining the strap. While he had never been very conscious of the collar until now, for some reason Sojiro found himself blushing.
はい。つけたのは自分ですけど。
そうじゃなくて、誰からもらったの？青子？それともグオンジさん？
くれたのは青子ですね。
Toko nodded in satisfaction at Sojiro's candid response.
つまり、君は青子の持ち物なわけか。
He coldly muttered. This, the cordial atmosphere began to turn. Sojiro nodded, naturally oblivious to the edge in her words.
何でも所有されてるそうです。
The blunt observation made Toko burst out laughing. Apparently, Toko was the quirky type of person to laugh when least appropriate. As her laugh tapered off into a giggle, she picked up her now empty teacup.
じゃあ、これも青子のでしょ？青っていう名前にコンプレックスがあるくせに、青いものが割と好きだから。
そうですけど、おかわりしますか？二人ともまだ帰ってきそうにありませんから。
いいえ、そろそろ帰ってくる頃よ。そういいえ、そろそろ帰ってくる頃よ。そういう風に仕向けたから。
Sojiro nodded along heedlessly. Finally, the strangeness of her phrasing dawned on him, and he tilted his head in confusion.
トウコさん？
Toko sidelined. So basically, the thing that happened in the subway was her stalling the two. Yeah.
ごめんね、宗十郎くん。メガネ外してもいいかしら。
I wondered why she would need to ask his permission. Not anyway.
それじゃあお言葉に甘えて。もう少しぐらいは君の反応を見ていたかったけど。
Toko touched the temples of her glasses. If one were to look closely enough, one might have noticed the scars on her slender fingers. They were small, fine scars from years of repeated cuts. Before her fingers even left the eyeglass frames, the spectacles crumbled. It happened so fast that Sojiro barely registered it. The frame cracked into pieces, sliding down her face and into her lap.
やるもんだ。30体を一瞬とはね。
Her voice belonged to someone entirely different. All she had done was take off her glasses. Elegant grace had completely faded. Any semblance of warmth and kindness had disappeared. Sitting upon a sofa was a deplorable mage, very presence darkening the room. Sojiro sat speechless. Across from him was completely changed Toko, glaring back at him menacingly. Malice and magical energy was now emanating from Toko than when Aoko had tried to kill Sojiro. She seemed titillated at the prospect of the boy's shock at her transformation. Such expectations, however, often left unfulfilled when it came to Sojiro.
メガネ壊れましたね。
He's the background expression. Sojiro blurted out in surprise. Ian stopped as she reached for a cigarette, when taken out of her sails.
もったいない。大丈夫ですかそれ。
いや、そんなものはいいんだ。多少視力が落ちたところで大ごとにはならないし。そもそも私がある限り、五感による情報にすら主観が入る。すべてこの世は霧の中だ。もともと目に見えるだけのものは信じていないたちでね。
Her speech had taken on a clinical tone. This too did not seem to shake Sojiro.
そうですか。それで、さっきの。
Sojiro began forming another question, unflinchingly. Toko scowled, as if she'd found another bug in her food. For some consideration, she came to the conclusion she needed to be blunt with the boy. By some twist of fate, it was a headache she now unknowingly shared with her sister.
意味も何もない。青子たちの帰り道に多少の障害を置いただけだ。私がここにいる間は外で足止めをするように。君は青子の持ち物だと言ったな。ならことさら丁寧に教えてやる必要もない。告白してしまうとね、宗十郎君。私が君たちの敵なんだ。
Stood her words. The clock's second hand would rotate fully twice over before anything next spoke. Anyone. They sat across from each other, eyes locked. Sojiro's shoulders tightened nervously. He had finally understood the true danger of the situation.
驚いた。
Toko asked with a grin. She was still the same woman, but without her glasses. Toko's smile was rather sinister.
あなたは青崎の姉なのに。
Her smile pierced him as he asked the obvious. Toko was no longer surprised that Sojiro would be more concerned about the safety of the others than his own. In just one short hour, he had come to understand Sojiro's Shizuki better than he knew himself.
逆だよ。姉だから敵なんだ。私には青子からあらゆる権利を奪う義務がある。物質的なものも精神的なものも、その全てを踏みにじらなければ気が済まない。
Sounds like she's gonna crush Sojiro as well. Or try.
尺度として言うなら、もし青子がこの町に頼っていたのなら、まず町から壊していたぐらい。けど、君のことは予想外だった。
Toko, her eyes closed, felt sorrow. Behind her troubled expression, there was a silent conflict.
世の平等に起こるべきか、偶然の出会いとやらに嘆くべきか。これも抑止力というやつかな。無垢な部外者を手にかけるのは世の常だが、この手合いにあったのは初めてだ。いや、そもそもいるなどと考えたことすらなかったな。
Toko sighed at the ceiling and stirred in her seat. She seemed to have overcome an unexpected moment of uncertainty.
君は青子の切り札には見えない。排除しておくまでもない善良かつ無能な部外者だ。だから放っておきたいのだけど、私の六感がこう告げているんだ。君を逃がすな。いいからさっさと済ませてしまえ。と。
Plainly put, she had made up her mind to kill him. Sojiro was somewhat flattered at how grossly she inflated his importance. Struck more by the comic irony, Toko had arrived at the same conclusion as her sister. But this was no time for idle thoughts. Sojiro readied himself to stand up on the sofa, in such a way as to not draw attention to the plan so clearly written all over his face, to make a run for it.
バカ者。こういう時は半端に動くな。逃げるならさっさと逃げる。交渉するならテコでも動くな。なんというか、そんな風に動かれるとその気がなくともつい反応してしまうだろう。ほら、命が惜しいのならおとなしく固まっていなさい。
殺さないんですか？
今のところはね。私は君が気に入ったし。いや、違うな。正しくはこう。私ぐらいしか君を救ってあげられないのかも、かな。
はい。
He looked the perplexed Tojo straight in the eyes. They were actually brown. Her eyes gleamed a piercing red, like the edge of a blade. It was at this moment an overwhelming sense of dizziness overcame Sojuro. His mind went numb, he couldn't tell who he was. It was like drifting into a sinister sleep from which he'd never wake. Sojuro clenched his jaw, desperate to maintain consciousness. Toko's eyes devoured him like a bottomless pit quicksand. In that moment, it all became clear to him. It no longer mattered that she was Alco's sister, or that she was Alice's sworn enemy. Falco Elsaki's deadly battle with the girls had become his battle. Which is why, when you find yourself feeling a special spark for a stranger met mere moments ago, that feeling is not to be trusted. It may simply be attempting to fill a void shaped like yourself, with more emptiness. Sojuro tried to drag his body away from this heretofore unencountered sense of danger. He found that it would not respond. Hoko tilted her head forward at him, eyes fixated on his.
君の思う通り、私は君と似たところがある。それとも君が私に近いのかな。何？食べ物の好き嫌い程度の類似だが、軽視することでもない。問題は、君が私より偏っているということでね。
He clearly used a different definition of the word than the one Sojuro knew. That he was alone. He was an outsider who didn't belong in this town. Sudden and seething anger eclipsed his gentle heart.
俺、一人じゃないですけど。
Sojuro shot back with all the enmity he could muster. As he faced this witch named Toko Aozaki. If he had not, he feared he would never escape her gaze.
だろうな。だからこそ君は偏っているんだ。早くそれに気づきなさい。一番手っ取り早い解決は、それでいいんだと認めることだ。人間なんてたくましいもんでね。別に何もかも放り投げてもうまくいくものなのさ。けれど、青子にはそれは許せない。あれは他人であれ、あらゆることを許さない人間だからな。
Oko leaned over the table. She reached out, grabbed Sojuro's collar, and roughly pulled him towards her.
いや、そんなことはいいんだ。ただ純粋に、私は君が欲しいと思った。君が自分の名前すら定かではないと名乗った時にね。自分の認識が不明で、自分自身が不能と感じる。未来というものがとても自分に関わりのあることとは思えない。となれば必然、心情は過去への逆行を試みる。しかし、所詮ソアの前のモアのように、正常な流れの前には時間旅行は押し戻されてしまう。それも私にあって君にあるものだ。ああ、なんて無様な私、なんて哀れな。
Oko trailed off mid-sim. But she pulled Sojuro closer, her eyes reflected in his. He noticed the merciful expression on her face. Sojuro got to thinking. He held no hostility towards this woman. He bore her no grudge, harbored no desire to kill her. He was aware only of his anger, and it was his compassion. He wished that he could give her the answers she wanted, but
あなたの言っていることはよくわからない。
Sojiro replied apologetically, a verbal reply to the visible question he perceived in her eyes. Toko showed no sign of disappointment. Instead, the corners of her lips turned upward in delight.
そうか。君には言葉の暗示は通じないんだな。意味深なセリフ回しで丸飲みにしてやろうとも思ったが、いや失敗。小綺麗な建前は逆効果だった。君にはむき出しの原始的な語りの方が良かったんだな。いいよ。ますます気に入った。
Fingers dug into his throat, as if she were tearing at the leather. That he could be hers, if only she could rip it off.
少年、青子なぞより私のもとに来い。使い道はないが保護ぐらいはしてやろう。手が空いた時なら気晴らしに愛してやってもいい。
Taken many approaches, she seemed to have decided on this one. The lengths to which she went to seduce him, not lost on Sojiro. Truth be told, they were not wholly unwelcome. Back to the matter at hand.
それはお断りします。
Sojiro chose the direct response, as he did.
なぜ？
だってあなたのためにならない。
He had confidence in that, at least. Toko's overestimation of him aside, Sojiro knew for a fact that he had to escape this woman's clutches. Its tete-a-tete, I don't know what that is, could only be concluded by one of its two participants. Toko, or the individual she was currently infatuated with. The boy mustered all the conviction he could feign. She gently removed her hand from his collar and jabbed him in the chest, causing him to topple back onto the sofa.
そうか。なら仕方がない。君も青子の大切な持ち物として考えることにしよう。
The scarred red mage quietly stood up.
青子が帰ってくる頃だから私は行くよ。青子では私には勝てないとだけ伝えておいてくれればいい。
それはいいんですけど。
Before she left the room, Toko paused to let Sojiro continue. A student humbly inquiring of a teacher, Sojiro pointed to the object in Toko's hand and asked,
そのカップどうするんです？
Surprised, she looked down at the teacup in her right hand that she had forgotten she was holding. She hadn't even realized she had been holding the cup the entire time.
これ？うん。せっかくだからもらっていく。
The act of taking something without the owner's permission is commonly referred to as theft. However, this was more likely the typical relationship between Alko and Toko, share and share alike, and so forth. Sojiro nodded to show that he understood. Unsure if his nod was sincere or not, Toko smiled that gleeful grin for the second time since taking her glasses off.
やはり変わり種だね、君は。逸材かどうかは別の話だが。
Look, Nix. For just a moment, she had returned to the affable Toko Aosaki, met before the glasses came off. Leaving him with the image of a smile, she departed the mansion. Broken glasses remained on the drawing room table. No sooner had the eerie visitor lived, did Alko and Alice return home. Despite Alko's sour mood, she seemed as merry as ever. Despite everything that happened, and their trip having its fair share of problems, she still had fun. Alice was her usual stoic self. Her manner met not unlike a parent following behind a rampaging toddler, cleaning up their mess. The scene of their return was like something out of a TV sitcom, and lost in thought, Sojiro forgot to greet them.
Sojiro, 留守中何かあった？
Ko asked, also out of etiquette than curiosity, removing a coat. That minute, he stood up from the sofa.
そりゃ半日分の出来事はあったけど、それより寒かっただろう。お茶を入れようか？
ああ、お願い。こっちも一から作戦練り上げようってとこだから。
Sojiro was on his way to the kitchen to prepare tea even before Aoko had finished her upbeat response.
なんだろう、どこか変だ。
It was following the same tea brewing routine as always. Somehow something did not feel the same. As though in a trance, Sojiro returned to the drawing room, sitting down, placed the tea on the table.
これからどうするつもりなの、青
とりあえず足で探すしかないわね。あいつ相手に守りに入るのは良くない。こっちが城壁を作ってる間に一個師団の人形をこさえかねないわ。
Conversed with each other while ignoring Sojiro's presence. Upon hearing what they said, he stood up and spoke abruptly.
探すってトウコさんを？
それ以外誰を探すって。ちょっと、あんた今なんて言ったの？
トウコさんなんだろ、青崎たちの敵は。さっきまでここにいたよ。
So casually, Aoko standing there dumbfounded. Alice stood up from the sofa, went to where the two of them were standing. The typically kind and somber features turned reproachable.
しずきくん、その人何かしていった？
お茶を飲んでメガネを外して帰っていっただけだけど、あれ、よく思い出せないな。
What was once a clear memory seemed to have been scrubbed clean from his mind. Sojiro was overcome by the same dizziness he had felt earlier. A sharp, dry smack echoed through the room. What snapped him out of his haze was an unexpected slap from Alice.
二度は言わないわ。他人を私の家に立ち入らせないで。
Deep within her eyes, beyond the normal cool indifference, was an intense fury. Realizing, however, it was no ordinary anger, Sojiro understood how careless he had been.
すまない。アリスにとってここが大事な場所なのは分かってたのに。
A heavy silence followed. Sojiro and Alice stood there, chained to the spot by their own regret. Aoko looked on in amazement, wondering if they would stay this way all night if left alone.
あのね、姉貴を通した宗十郎も悪いけど、言ってなかったアリスも悪いでしょ。子供じゃないんだから、いつまでも反省してないで、もっと前向きに話をしない？
Alice hung her head and sat back down at Aoko's insistence. Sojiro stood where he was, nursing his stinging right cheek. Pain was pain, but he knew how to take a knock. More to the point, the crisp strike from Alice snapped him out of his fog, jogging his memory.
思い出した。青子じゃ私には勝てないって伝えておいてほしいって。
大した自信ね。他には？
他は基本的に世間話だったというか、あ、ソアとかモアとかよくわからないことを口にしてたな。
Considering the small talk was mostly about Aoko and the flaws, Sojiro decided it would be better to take that part to his grave.
大河とショウガ？あの人、インドにでも行ってたのかしら。ところで宗十郎、あんた、姉貴に何かされたわね。
Aoko turned to him, glaring sharply. He had nothing to be ashamed of, but he looked away guiltily anyway.
何かって何さ？
思い出せないとか言ってたでしょ。さっきまでの態度もふわふわしてたし。そうか、メガネを外したまでは覚えてたってことは魔眼にでも見入られたか。
As quickly as she had jumped to that conclusion, Aoko went quiet again, as if the information was of little importance. It was not enough to detract Sojiro from bringing it up again.
青崎、魔眼ってなんだ？
魔力を帯びた目のことよ。簡単なものは一時的な混乱を、上級なものは睨んだだけで相手を殺すとかね。バロールみたいな魔眼の持ち主なんて伝説だけだろうし、そもそもそんな魔眼持ちが生まれてくるなら、私たちの悩みもあっさり終わるってものだけど。
Without further context, Aoko knew her explanation was completely lost on Sojiro.
そうね。わかりやすく言うと、私の魔弾みたいなのを目から照射するようなもんよ。
目から青崎か。
What's funny? Sojiro's confusion deepened along with Aoko's frustration.
だから あなた一度目を閉じた後の瞳子の目を見たんでしょ。その一瞬で姉貴の魔眼に捕まったってこと。目を猫名詞に入れ替える魔術師もいるけど、姉貴はそんなことする必要はないから。あの人生まれながらの魔眼持ちだしね。さしたる準備も栄唱もなしでシャッターするだけで切り替え自由なの。
Sojiro pounded his fist in understanding. Now he thought about it. He vaguely remembered her doing something exactly like that. Everything after was foggy and muddled, and her mystic eyes seemed the only logical cause.
その話は分かったけど、瞳子さんは青崎のお姉さんなんだろ。なんで姉妹で殺し合いをしてるんだ。
It's not something you should ask, but he did anyway. The question was against the rules. No business being involved in this dispute. Closed her eyes to collect her thoughts. She decided it was best for all involved to at least share some background information, but only to head off further questions.
いいわ、話してあげる。姉貴に関わった以上事情を説明しておかないと危ないし。けどなんであれ聞き返すのはなしね。この件に関しては私は私の事情を話すだけだから。
He stared down Sojiro until he nodded slowly in recognition. He knew this was confirmation though. The conversation was becoming oddly friendly again, but Alko sat up a little straighter as she prepared to tell the tale.
姉貴の話をするってことは、私と青崎の家の話と、何より魔術と魔法の話をしないといけない。少し遠回りになるし、他言無用な内容だけど、いずれあんたの記憶は消えるから問題ないってことで。
Alko made sure to add that disclaimer as a condition for telling him the information in the first place.
魔術っていうのはね、宗十郎、いわば共通のルールなのよ。ルーンやカバラといった魔術系統はそれぞれの科目、世界共通のマニュアルだと思えばいい。教科書さえきちんと持っているのなら、あとは血脈次第で誰でも魔術師にはなれるわ。けど魔法を使うのは別。魔法は魔術みたいに根源の渦から派生した写本じゃなくて、根源の渦に直接つながるものだから。
It's just a manuscript derived from the swallow, like Reg card is, but something that comes directly from the root itself.
この根源の渦っていうのは、宗十郎の分かるレベルに落とし込むと、まあ太陽みたいなものと考えて。遠くにあって何より初めにあるもので、それなくしては私たちは生活できないと言う。魔術っていうのはこの太陽からの恩恵を利用しただけのものよ。自然現象の模倣ないし代償が魔術の本質だから。神秘を学び実践し再現するけど、神秘そのものを作ることはできない。いえ、研究の末にたどり着くんでしょうけど、そこには大きな壁がある。人知では越えられないリミッターみたいな壁がね。で、魔法っていうのは太陽そのものを扱うこと。誰にも到達できない場所に行って何者にも真似できない奇跡を起こす。お金をかけようが時間をかけようが今の人類には到達できない技術、それが魔法。次元の壁を越えるっていうか、最後まで走ってみたら全く違うルールでできた世界があって、そのルールを学んじゃったってとこかしら。前に魔術に限界はないって言ったでしょ。あれは人知の及ぶ範囲なら限界はないって意味ね。対して魔法は限界だらけっていうか、一つのことしかできないけど、それも当然なの。だってこの宇宙の仕組みから仲間外れの一つっきりの交点なんだから。
魔術より魔法の方がすごいというのは流れ的にわかるんだけど、限界だらけなんだよな。
限界っていうか、特例特権越権の類ね。汎用性はないけど誰にもできないことを可能とする時点で魔術世界にとっては万能とされる。そもそも魔法は根源の渦にたどり着いた魔術師へのご褒美みたいなもので、たとえその術者に魔法を使うだけの肉体性能がなくても根源へのパスができただけで魔術的にはやりたい放題ってわけ。 要は地球で一番のお金持ちになるってこと。
Soldier made an appreciative sound, impressed. On the other hand, Alice looked as though she wished to make many revisions to alcohol the count.
一番の大金持ちか。じゃあどんなにお金持ちでも一番目でない以上は魔法はもらえないんだな。
まあそういうこと。時々とんでもない角度で確信をつくわねこいつ。あんたの言う通り、同じルート同じ方法で根源にたどり着いても1番目じゃないと魔法にはたどり着けない。
Okay.
どんなに優れていても2番目以降には意味がないのよ。魔法使いが5人、いえ4人か。現存する魔法使いが4人しかいないのは一度使われたルートは閉ざされてしまうから。大昔はそうでもなかったって話だけどね。根源への道、真理への到達に壁を作ったのは皮肉なことに人間自身だった。未知を解明すればするほどルートが閉じていくなんて昔の魔術師たちは思いもしなかったんでしょう。でも結果はこの通り。気がついた時には後の祭りっていうか、多くの研鑽の末この世から魔法は消えていっちゃったわけ。
それは山と町の関係に似てると思っていいのかな。
ミクロな視点で言うなら似たようなものよ。で、つい最近まで現代の魔術師たちは残された最後の席を求めていたけど、それもちょっと前にどこぞの田舎者が横取りしちゃって椅子取りゲームはあえなく終了。あとは魔法抜きで根源にたどり着くため地味で無意味な魔術の研究を続けることになった。もともと魔法なんてのを優先してたのは一部の魔術師だけで、他の真っ当な連中はとっくに見切りをつけてたんだけどね。だって魔術師にとって最終目的は根源の渦への到達であって魔法じゃないし。そのあたりいつの間にかごっちゃになっちゃったんでしょ。卵が先か鶏が先かって話。
よし、全くわからないってことは分かったんで、そろそろ本題に入ってくれ。あ、けど1番目の人間しか魔法使いになれないのに魔法使いは何人もいるのか？
Yeah, that's what I'm confused about too.
5人いたわ。最終的に人間に残される最後の課題は5つだろうって一番初めの。
Does that mean there's 5 routes to the...
青子、
じゃあ本題ね。魔法と魔術の関係が分かったところでようやくうちの話になるんだけど、青崎の家が代々魔術師だったのは前に言ったでしょ。歴史的には浅いけど運と才能には恵まれていたのね。青崎はなんだかんだって魔法にまでたどり着いたんだから。
ちょっと待った。じゃあ青崎がその…
私はあくまで魔術師見習い。使えないし使う気もないわよ魔法なんて。私はただ青崎の家を継いだだけだもの。
Kura said it obtusely, her voice devoid of emotion. She became a mage not to wield magic, simply because the succession of her family's magecraft was forced on her.
とにかく根源の渦にたどり着くには何代も何代も魔術を研究しなくちゃいけない。自分独自の皮を作るようなものなんだから、もちろんその過程は果てがない。よほどの天賦か典型でもない限り魔法を作るなんてできないしね。そしてもし根源にたどり着いてもふさわしい後継者がいなければ一代限りの奇跡で終わってしまう。だから魔術師は血脈を重ねて代々の魔力を時代に積み重ねていく。自分より優れた後継者を生むために。
Alco wrapped up the explanation by remarking that it was like producing a thoroughbred. That soldier knew what a thoroughbred was to begin with, leaving him as perplexed at the end of the story as he was at the beginning.
そうやって代を重ねて魔術師は作り上げた独自の神秘、守り続けた魔術を 次の世代に伝えていくの。きっと最後の最後に全ての疑問を打ち消すに足る答えがあるはずだって。でも魔術師、いえ魔法使いだってみんな悟ってるのよ。自分の代でもその次の代でもきっと最後の最後の最後まで誰もゴールにはたどり着けないって結末を。それを分かっていながら魔術を研究していくのが神秘学に取り憑かれた者の宿命だって祖父はよく口にしてた。けど私の姉はそうじゃなかったみたい。
The left I could see why, hanging in the air. The destiny of those who obsess over mystics that end up learning magecraft. Alex had no response. Aozaki family passing down true magic. Aoko the reluctant successor. And Toko Aozaki, her elder sister.
本当は青崎の後継者は姉貴だった。私もうちの家業が何であるかは教えられてきたけど実践することはなかったのよ。魔術師の家系はよっぽど裕福でもない限り基本的に一子相伝だからね。うちほんと財力的には一般家庭レベルだし。で後継者にはより魔術に適したものが選ばれるわけだけど姉貴は確かに天才だった。けどそれは青崎の後継者にはいらない才能だった。
え？
その代わり私は心底青崎の後継者としてふさわしかったみたい。まあそれはそれでどうも思わないけど祖父がはっきりと私にくら替えしたのが15歳の冬の頃でさ。姉貴はいきなり4つ年下で今まで魔術に関わってなかった妹に魔法の相続権利を奪われたってわけよ。
That's kind of fucked up, but alright.
そうか、それで
Toko had said that she was obligated to take what was Aoko's. I recalled how resentful her voice had been when she said it.
あの人がどんな思いをしたか私は本人じゃないから知らないけど祖父と言い争って今まで愛用してたメガネを叩き壊して家を出て行ったのが3年と半年前。それから全く消息なしで私は姉の代わりになったの。これが私と姉貴の争う原因でしょうね。
Sojiro thought the story was tragic. Aoko's voice had a tone of relief in it. Sojiro did not know exactly who he should feel bad for anymore.
メガネを壊した。
そう、あの人昔はすっごく目が良かった。生まれながら魔眼を持ってたって化け物だからね。けど祖父の期待に応えようとして無理して頑張った挙句視力が下がっちゃったみたい。
Aoko wrestled with the memory, sure if she had everything down exactly right. Sojiro knew how well Aoko could hide her emotions, and this was not one of those moments.
けどあれに何の意味があったんだろう。
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that Aoko had voluntarily left behind the succession. Like she gave it up on, like she wanted to. This is like the grandfather's like, no, you're not fit. Ah, we're switching to the other one. Fuck you. So, yeah, okay, I can understand why Aoko wants it back now. That makes sense. Yeah. It's like she put in effort all her life and then suddenly like, nah, you're not good enough. Switch to Aoko. And Aoko's like, what? I didn't want this.
メガネをジジイに叩きつけるぐらいならフィンの一撃でも叩き込めばよかったのに。あの人あの頃が才能のピークだったんだし猛録したジジイなんてそれこそ一撃だったと思うんだけど。
Sojiro shook his head, disappointed at Aoko's misjudgment of the situation.
恨みつらみの話じゃない。そのメガネは大事なものだったんだ。だってそれは誰にだってわかる努力の証なんだから。それを叩きつけたんだ。痛かったんだろうな。 思い出を自分で壊さなくちゃいけないくらいに。
As Sojiro spoke, neither Alcon nor Alice noticed the grief he was fighting to hold in. More accurately, they could not understand his point of view. After all, in a world where mages are raised to fight other mages, empathy was short in supply.
けどどうして今頃になって戻ってきたのかしら。青子の言う通り、瞳子さんならもっと早く美咲氏を奪えたのに。
そうね。そんなに土地が欲しかったのなら3年前に私を殺せば後継者に戻れたのに。世間の荒波に揉まれて気が変わったとか？
違う。青崎は本当にわからないのか。
Sojiro shook with a faint anger. His voice changed from the boy they thought they knew.
何よ、あんたならわかるっていうの？
誰だってわかる。瞳子さんは青崎が一人前になるまで待っていたんだ。自分が失ったものと同じくらい大切なものをなくさせるために。そうしないとどうにもならない。そこまでしなくちゃいけないほどあの人の怒りは深かったんだ。
Sojiro gazed at them, wondering why they could not see what he could. But he was the one that did not understand. The two girls, and above all, Toko Aozaki, deny themselves the type of relationships that other normal people are allowed to experience. Toko's actions were not fueled by hatred. While there certainly was hatred behind them, the real reason was, and always has been, Toko's pursuit of true magic. She was an ambitious and talented mage. Her hatred was only her veneer. Thinking of her in any other way would be an insult to the older sister who devoted her life to the study of magecraft. All this Alko wanted to tell Sojiro, but instead stopped herself. Even if she had, Sojiro was not a mage and could never understand. Besides, arguing with him any further would not have brought her any joy. She could not have put it into words even if she had tried. So,
やけに姉貴の肩を持つじゃない、宗十郎。もしかして一目惚れでもした？
in her own cowardly way, Alko dodged the subject. She smirked childishly.
肩ぐらい持つ。あの人はかわいそうな人だからな。
Sojiro did not take the bait. Alko was frustrated at his reply.
なぜ？
An icy glare replaced her smile. He did not falter, only plainly stating,
だって実の妹と争わなくちゃいけないんだろ。それはかわいそうなことじゃないのか。
this was the source of his frustration.
確かにね。
Alko's eyes narrowed unconsciously, as if hiding from a painful truth. Guy is a poison, she thought to herself. A poison with no antidote. With his words, he was unwittingly bringing her weakness to light.
だけど私も姉貴もそれを何とも思ってないのよ。だってそれ以外に解決策はないんだから。
Sojiro looked down and frowned in defeat. That's sad too, muttered. Curtain of night had already fallen. Not even an hour had passed since Toko left the estate, and Sojiro was feeling the distance between him and the girls. Aoko and Alice felt much the same way about Toko Aozaki, who seemed more elusive than a phantom.
とにかく姉貴が敵だってことは宗十郎にも分かったでしょ。ならつべこべ言わず君子危うきに近寄らずよ。まあ姉貴もあんたと会って私たちとは全くの無関係だって分かっただろうから、そっちには手を出してこないでしょうけど。
Aoko seemed absolutely certain in her assessment, as if to proclaim that Sojiro had dodged a bullet. Strangely, she was placing her trust in her enemy's sense of reason.
そうかな。そうなのかな。そうだといいんだけどな。
そうだから安心なさい。昔からいらないものには手を出さないんだから、あの人。
そっか。青崎がそこまで言うなら安心する。あ、いらないものって言えば、瞳子さんが青崎のティーカップをもらうって、セーブルのやつ。
ちょっと待って。あんたそれを黙って見てたっていうの？
そうだけど、やっぱりあれは奪っていったのか。
Sojiro nodded sagely, while Alko fumed. He wondered where his serious manner and tone had gone. Sojiro's frustrating absent-mindedness had returned.
しかもセーブルのカップって私の一番のお気に入り。
His fist trembled violently. As much as she wanted to, she knew better than to plant it into Sojiro's carefree face. Not that he was even capable, but even if Sojiro did try to stop Toko, it would have gone tragically for him.
仕方ないか。そういえばあの人、よく私の持ち物を奪っていったっけ。他人のものを欲しがる癖、まだ治ってないんだ。
ん？子供の頃はみんなそうなんじゃないのか
Aloud, curiously.
そうかな。私のクレヨンとか人形とか取っても仕方ないと思うけど、どうせ粉々にしちゃうんだし。
Sojiro felt his heart jump to his mouth. The ominous foreshadowing was not lost on him.
それはどういう？
だから、あの人って私の持ち物を横取りしてはぶっ壊すのが趣味なのよ。苦節14年。姉貴に目をつけられて無事だったものなんて一つもないもの。
Listening to Alko, Sojiro recalled his conversation with Toko. He hoped he was imagining it, but he vaguely recalled her declaring Sojiro's Shizuki as someone's property.
それはちょっと難儀だな。
She's coming after you! Sojiro's face turned grim, not unlike a detective at the scene of a crime. A scene which left no traces of evidence or clues as to how the case could be solved.
でしょ？ひどい姉貴なのよ、あの人って。
Sojiro's turmoil, Alko calmly sipped her tea. Sojiro watched as Alko shrugged her shoulders, while looking over to the drawing room clock. No matter how heavy the mood, time kept on ticking.
明日から大変になるね。
The undeniable victim of today's injustices. Alko looked ready to move on from the incident, adding,
そうね。でも今は、そんなことより今日の夕飯のが楽しみなんだ、私。
Alko seemed to second that opinion with a silence. Comfortable and relaxed, neither of them seemed to have any intention of leaving the sofa to prepare for food. Tonight was supposed to be his night off from work. At least, until midnight. Sojiro knew that until the clock struck midnight, he would be serving on hand and foot the two ladies of the house. For one, it would take at least another hour to prepare something to eat. And there was no way the exhausted Alko and Alice would stand for that, so the only other option in the end was to have something delivered.
なんとトウコさんについていけばよかったかもしれないな俺。
Sojiro opened his wallet as he second-guessed his situation. His eyes settled on the third and final 10,000 yen bill in his wallet. It stared at him back forlornly, reluctant to leave its home. With a heavy heart, he bid it farewell. Okay. It's probably good to save it and call it here for today. I think next chapter is going to be a big one. We're probably going to get into a fight with Toko there. I'm going to call it there for today. Tuesday, I think. I'll probably stream AFGO. It's been a while. We're going to finish that story, so we're going to do that. Yeah. See where we go. Alright. Thanks guys for watching. Thanks anyone else to be here. I don't know if anyone is still here. We'll continue with this maybe Thursday. Maybe Thursday. Alright. Cool. Alright. I'll see you guys later.